Chapter 892. With that, Wuming waved his hand, and Azh-Dakaha's three-headed dragon body appeared in the center of Wuming's dragon claw. Wuming tapped Azh-Dakaha's body lightly, and for some unknown reason, Azh-Dakaha's body instantly disintegrated into mysterious particles, and all of them were absorbed into the newly created spirit base by Wuming. In that case, Collis, you must complete the absolute evil problem first. After all, if he did not complete the absolute evil problem first, this spirit base would not be able to be used in the singularity. Yes, Master. The dragon horn on Wuming's head responded. Then, Wuming gave Collis the authority. After everything was ready, Wuming tapped his spirit base lightly. Go. A summoning magic circle appeared under the spirit base's feet, and in an instant, Wuming's spirit base disappeared. Collis, Enkidu, I'll leave it to you. Wuming finished and fell into a deep sleep. The moment Wuming fell into a deep sleep, the golden chains wrapped around Wuming's dragon claw rattled, and as if they were endless, they danced around the entire route, as if they were protecting Wuming, who was at the center of the platform. At the same time, the dragon horn on Wuming's head also glowed, as if it was using Wuming's authority to do something. Soon after, the entire route fell into darkness once more. Only the golden chains that covered the route and Wuming's dragon horn headdress shone, both of them fulfilling their duty to the fullest. In the northern fir forest, in an inconspicuous bush, a magic array suddenly appeared and glowed brightly. The light of the magic circle disappeared, and the magic circle lost its form, but a figure appeared in the bush. How did I end up here? Wuming walked out of the bush, took off the grass and other things on his body, and used magic to transform into a set of Uruk clothes. Wuming began to complain. By the way, this should be Gorgon's territory, right? How did I end up here? When Wuming inserted the spirit base into the Mesopotamia singularity, he clearly aimed in the direction of the Uruk, and Wuming thought that no matter what, he could at least get closer to the Uruk. But instead of getting close to the Uruk, he ended up near the enemy's base. Although Gorgon said that she would not come out of her temple before she recovered, if Wuming, who once heavily injured her, appeared in front of Gorgon's gate again, she might not be able to resist the urge to come out and beat him. In any case, I should leave this place first. As for the idea of taking advantage of this opportunity to kill Gorgon, Wuming had considered it before, but the real enemy was probably not Gorgon. Wuming thought of the dream he had the night when he left the Quetzalcoatl's territory. At that time, Wuming only sensed that there was a stronger enemy behind all this, and according to his discussion with Gilgamesh and Merlin, that existence was probably the real Tiamat. He did not know what effect eliminating Gorgon would have on Tiamat. If it could weaken Tiamat, it would be best, but if Gorgon's death caused Tiamat to appear in person, it would be really bad. Collis hadn't dealt with the absolute evil issue yet, and Wuming's current spiritual base was temporarily no match for Tiamat, so he had to wait for a while. Then, according to his own judgment, Wuming began to move in the direction of the Uruk. In order to avoid encountering magical beasts that might exist in the fir forest, Wuming did not choose to directly pass through the fir forest. Instead, he chose to detour to the highlands in the southwest, preparing to return to the Uruk from there. Even if it was a magical beast, it was impossible to run to such a desolate place. That was why Wuming chose this place. Standing on a bare mountainous platform, Wuming couldn't help but complain. If the magical beasts can detour from the mountainous area, perhaps the Uruk will be doomed. But that was impossible. Gorgon alone couldn't produce a large number of magical beasts with the ability to fly or travel in the highlands. Besides, if it could, perhaps Gorgon would have done so long ago and there would be no need for it to fight to the death with the humans on the magical beast's front. Could it be that Gorgon was waiting for something? In Wuming's opinion, this was too unrealistic. And as a non-human servant, Wuming naturally heard it clearly. Snore. As the growl got closer, Wuming scanned his surroundings. Wuming was standing on a small platform, but even if it was a platform, it was still a highland. Therefore, if there were creatures walking from a low place to a high place, Wuming wouldn't be able to see those creatures with his eyes because of the wide platform. And if those creatures spread to surround them, not to mention ordinary people, even the slightly weaker servants could only wait for death. That's right, Wuming was surrounded. Wuming's mental power clearly transmitted the images of the creatures that were constantly spreading to Wuming's mind. They were some red-haired magical beasts that were more than 2 meters tall and looked like hyenas. Yilidim, Silent's eyes shone with a bright light. The last time he came to this singularity, Wuming saw a magical beast called Yilidim produced by Gorgon, but they seemed to be a lot bigger than the last time I saw them. As mentioned before, these Yilidim were more than 2 meters tall. Roughly speaking, they were more than 2.5 meters tall, close to 3 meters tall. The Yilidim that Wuming saw last time weren't that big, at most, they were more than 2 meters tall. As a result, these Yilidim that appeared in front of Wuming were close to 3 meters tall. I'm afraid that Gorgon is really focused on healing his injuries. Otherwise, how could there be so many Yilidim? At present, only Gorgon didn't go out to heal his injuries and focused on producing enhanced magical beasts could explain why these Yilidim were so big. Are they treating me as prey? Wuming couldn't help but scratch his head. They should be able to realize that Wuming wasn't a human, or they couldn't see the difference in strength between the two sides. It was fine if they couldn't feel the difference in strength, but Wuming was emitting a very dangerous aura at the moment. Magical beasts were also beasts, and their perception of danger wasn't as slow as humans. But even if they felt Wuming's powerful aura, the Yilidim were still quite bold and bravely surrounded Wuming. It seems that there is a leader behind the command. It was precisely because of the existence of a leader that these Yilidim didn't retreat because of Wuming's aura. After all, hyenas relied on numbers to compete with leopards and lions for food. Chapter 893. Unfortunately, at this moment, Wuming was neither an ordinary person nor a weak servant. He was a divine servant with an extremely powerful spirit base index. It could only be said that the leader of Yilidim had found the wrong prey. Wuming would treat them as prey instead. While Wuming was thinking, all the Yilidim climbed up the platform and completely surrounded Wuming. However, these Yilidim did not launch an attack. They just surrounded Wuming as if waiting for something. Then, the earth began to tremble. Boom! 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 A behemoth walked up from the mountainous platform. It was a red-haired, golden-haired kobold with a rag around its waist. Because it walked upright, it was much taller than the other Yilidim, and its body was full of muscles. Compared to Wuming, it was like a small giant. Its head was the same as the head of the Yilidim, but this kobold's eyes were blood-red. There were no whites or eyeballs. They were completely blood-red, just like a berserker who had gone berserk from all the killing. The key point was that this kobold exuded a much stronger aura than the other Yilidim. It seemed that this kobold was the leader of these Yilidim. Roar! The kobold roared at Wuming as if it was saying something, but ordinary people could not understand the language of the demonic beasts. However, Wuming unexpectedly understood. The kobold's general idea was more or less like this: I am Yilidim, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. I am also a son of the mother goddess. Why do you betray the mother goddess, Lachum? This made Wuming confused. How did he become Lachum? Although Wuming did not know why the kobold called him Lachum, he understood one thing. The kobold walking upright in front of him was different from other mass-produced demonic beasts. It was probably the real Yilidim of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The original Yilidim alone was far more intimidating than the mass-produced Yilidim. If this Yilidim was converted into a servant, it was probably a god-level servant, and a very strong one. There were also levels in the god level. Take Absolute Evil's avatar for example. Absolute Evil's two-headed dragon avatar was mostly a 5-digit number, which was a god-level disaster. But first of all, anything above 5 digits was a god level. And if the Ulidim in front of Wu Ming was a god-level servant, it was at least a top-level god-level servant. Legend has it that the god Kingu led the 11 sons of Tiamat to fight against the Sumer gods. Although the result was a defeat, the fact that the 11 sons of Tiamat could fight against the Sumer gods was enough to show the strength of the 11 sons of Tiamat. If such an existence interfered with the demonic beasts in the north wall, even if there were many servants on the front line, it would be quite difficult to resist. Not to mention that this guy seemed to be quite smart. As for why? Just based on Wu Ming's encounter with Ulidim in this mountainous region. Wu Ming wanted to bypass the demonic beasts in the north wall through the southwest mountains and return to Uruk. And these Ulidim happened to ambush Wu Ming. Obviously, these Ulidim came here in advance. In that case, could Wu Ming think that these Ulidim were also preparing to bypass the demonic beasts and attack the Uruk? If it was really an irrational demonic beast, it wouldn't choose to go through the mountains. Only in the presence of this Ulidim leader would these Ulidim follow the leader into the mountains. Perhaps it accidentally found Wu Ming coming out of the fir forest, so the kobold Ulidim chose to ambush him. I don't care what Lachim you are. You just want to hunt me. After Wu Ming finished speaking, the kobold Ulidim showed a human-like smile, as if admitting that Wu Ming was right. What a coincidence. I also want to hunt you, honorable the 11 sons. Wu Ming said. The distorted golden 7-headed snake staff emerged from the ripples beside him and fell into Wu Ming's palm. Wu Ming's spirit base was rider, but that didn't stop Wu Ming from acting as a caster. Roar! The original Ulidim roared. Along with Ulidim's roar, the other mass-produced Ulidim rushed toward Wu Ming. At that moment, it was as if a sea of red and yellow was about to devour Wu Ming. Wu Ming didn't panic. He tapped the 7-headed snake staff on the ground gently, and letter-like special runes covered the ground, which were trampled by the charging Ulidim. Crack! With a crack, the Ulidim closest to Wu Ming was instantly frozen. Although the ice was very thick, the frozen Ulidim could be seen clearly. For example, the frozen Ulidim closest to Wu Ming still had a ferocious expression on its face. It was simply lifelike. Whether it was the rippling hair due to running and jumping in the ice, or the unknown shredded flesh between its teeth, Wu Ming saw it all. Feeling the chill of the ice, some of the unfrozen Ulidim in the rear felt a little afraid and took 2 steps back. But because of the original Ulidim, they didn't dare to run away directly. Even if the minions are strengthened, they are still minions. Silent Wonder tapped the ground with his 7-headed snake staff once more, shattering the ice that sealed Ulidim. Ulidim and the rest of the ice turned into fine powder and scattered on the ground. The ground was covered in a layer of white, without a single trace of blood to be seen. This made the mass-produced Ulidim even more terrified. Some of them even turned around and ran away in fear. But in the next second, these mass-produced Ulidim were smashed into pieces by several other Ulidim that flew out of nowhere. Disgusting purplish-black blood splattered all over the ground, and indistinguishable broken limbs and flesh splattered everywhere. The remaining nerves made some of the flesh move twice, but it soon returned to normal. How cruel! Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at the kobold Ulidim who had retracted its hand. He clearly saw that the kobold had casually grabbed a few Ulidim around it and threw them at the fleeing Ulidim. It seemed that the kobold didn't treat these mass-produced Ulidim as its own kind, but as tools instead. Roar! The kobold Ulidim roared a few more times, as if reprimanding these Ulidim for being useless. When the remaining Ulidim heard their leader's words, they slowly retreated from the platform. In an instant, only Wu Ming and the kobold were left on the platform. Chapter 894. Does this mean you want to duel me? Wu Ming saw through Ulidim's intentions. It wasn't hard to understand. After all, even if the mass-produced Ulidim rushed forward, it would be useless. As expected of the 11 sons of Tiamat. This guy isn't simple. He has some brains. Wu Ming thought to himself. Moreover, since he still chose to duel Wu Ming after seeing Wu Ming's methods, it meant that he was confident in his own strength. Moreover, he didn't show any mercy when dealing with the mass-produced Ulidim that were scared out of their wits. He didn't even treat the mass-produced Ulidim as his own kind and directly captured them as weapons to kill the few mass-produced Ulidim that tried to escape. In addition, this prototype Ulidim brought the mass-produced Ulidim to the southwest mountains. It was very likely that he wanted to bypass the front line of the demonic beasts and go to the Uruk. Such a smart, powerful, and resourceful demonic beast. If this guy was allowed to return to the fir forest, who knew how much damage it would cause to the demonic beast's front line? I can't let him go. This was Wu Ming's thought at the moment. Coincidentally, Ulidim also had the same thought at the moment. From the beginning, Ulidim commanded the mass-produced Ulidim to ambush and hunt. In fact, he was preparing to devour the traitor of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The cunning kobold Ulidim clearly knew that his compatriot Lachimo, Wu Ming, had betrayed the mother goddess. Hunting Lachimo would not only help the mother goddess get rid of a scourge, but it would also strengthen itself by devouring its own kind. Why not? I can't let him go. This was also Ulidim's thought at the moment. A servant and a demonic beast looked at each other. A battle was about to break out. Roar! Ulidim roared. He didn't use any weapons and rushed at Wu Ming barehanded. It seemed that he was very confident in his physical strength. Wu Ming, on the other hand, used the Yggdrasil spell on the staff of Anzirgong to test Ulidim. Fire, ice, holy light, darkness, lightning, and even poison. All sorts of magical attacks were unleashed by the staff of Anzirgong, but none of them had any effect on Ulidim. However, no matter what, these spells should have been able to hinder Ulidim for a moment or two. In the end, Ulidim didn't seem to be hindered at all. In the blink of an eye, it had reached Wu Ming's side and used its sharp claws to viciously swipe at Wu Ming. Although Tiamat and the 11 beasts were all defeated and killed by Sumer, this didn't mean that the 11 beasts were weak. On the contrary, they were very strong. The 11 sons that Tiamat gave birth to did not possess the authority of a god because they were demonic beasts. They were only born as demonic beasts that far surpassed the Sumer gods in terms of physical strength. They perfectly matched the strength of the demonic beasts born by the gods of creation. The magic of the staff of Anzirgong had no effect on Ulidim, one of the 11 demonic beasts that could fight against the gods. Wu Ming, who had guessed this result, used the substitute magic of the staff of Anzirgong to block Ulidim's claw attack. Then, Wu Ming put the staff of Anzirgong aside and let it float beside him. Then, he unhurriedly took out an ancient book from the golden ripples and opened it. It was the nameless spellbook that Wu Ming hadn't used for a long time. The nameless spellbook recorded all the magic related to YGGDRSALL. Logically speaking, it should not have any offensive capabilities. The only reason the Shuoyu Mansion's temple could use the power of the nameless spellbook to release magic was because the Shuoyu Mansion was a silent temple. Therefore, he had a deep understanding of the useless Wu Ming of the nameless spellbook. As early as the root, Wu Ming had already transformed the nameless spellbook into a spellbook that could release the magic recorded in the book. If this was put in the lunar world, it would be the original spellbook of the original spellbook. In short, it was a super dangerous original spellbook. Since Wu Ming wanted to make a cameo appearance as caster, then he would definitely make a good cameo appearance. For example, he would use this spellbook. At the moment when Wu Ming took out the spellbook, Ulidim, who felt a sense of crisis, quickly retreated and took the initiative to open a distance from Wu Ming. As a magical beast, its beast instinct told it that if it rushed up, it was likely to be injured. It turned out that Ulidim's feeling was not wrong. A wind blade appeared around Wu Ming. It was a penetrating magic that could not be defended against, and its level was naturally the 10th order. Even if Ulydim's physical fitness was high, it would still be afraid when it encountered penetrating damage. You're quite alert. Wu Ming smiled. Indeed, if Ulydim rushed up just now, it would indeed be injured, or even lose an arm or a leg, so Ulydim and Wu Ming opened a distance. However, Silent Cry's initial goal wasn't to cast a penetrative Tier 10 spell, but rather a supreme spell. The penetrative Tier 10 spell was just a side dish that came along with it. At the moment when Wu Ming took out the Nameless Spellbook, he activated the plural supreme magic recorded in the Nameless Spellbook and entered the pre-roll. The supreme magic of Yggdrasil was a special skill with a very long pre-roll time. Generally, it was either an ambush in advance or using a Krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to achieve the effect of instant activation. The supreme magic recorded in the Nameless Spellbook was not immune to this drawback, and it also had a very long pre-roll time. But coincidentally, Wu Ming happened to have a Krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to instant activation. If the Kobold Ulydim had rushed up, Wu Ming would have immediately used the Krypton item, and Ulydim would have been covered by the supreme magic in an instant. But because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wu Ming, Ulydim did not rush up to Wu Ming, so Wu Ming did not activate the Krypton item. At the same time, because supreme magic users did not have any attack power when they were pre-roll, Ulydim was not too worried. It was only a little wary because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wu Ming. Simply put, it did not discover the existence of a supreme magic spell. The reason why the 11 magical beasts could not defeat the gods of Sumer was because they did not have the authority of the gods. In the end, they were defeated and killed by the gods who had the authority of the gods. And the plural supreme magic was comparable to the attack of the gods' authority. What Ulydim did not know was that although it had opened a distance from Wu Ming, it was still within the range of the supreme magic spell. Simply put, Ulydim was already half a step into the kingdom of death. Bang! Chapter 895. Wu Ming suddenly crushed the hourglass-like crystal in his hand. In an instant, extreme energy covered the surroundings with Wu Ming as the center. Sensing the danger, Ulydim's heart trembled. The other mass-produced Ulydim also fled in all directions, but it was all in vain. The white light of destruction covered them all in an instant. With Wu Ming as the center, a thick pillar of light appeared in the entire southwest mountain region. The pillar shot straight into the sky. The entire Mesopotamia shook as if there was a major earthquake. Even the Abif mountain in the northwest was shaken. Although they were demonic beasts, they were still children raised by Mother Earth. At this moment, the earth was angry. Although the demonic beasts that were attacking the north wall didn't panic to the point of running away, they subconsciously stopped their current actions due to the earthquake and stood rooted to the ground. Leonidas I, who was commanding the soldiers, was also shocked by the earthquake. However, he quickly realized that the earthquake wouldn't affect the north wall much. Now. Therefore, Leonidas I took the opportunity to command the soldiers to deal a heavy blow to the demonic beasts that were rooted to the ground due to their instincts. But then, the demonic beasts seemed to have been commanded and retreated one after another. Leonidas and the soldiers weren't surprised. They didn't chase after the demonic beasts. Instead, they cleaned up the battlefield. Rescuing the wounded, retrieving the corpses of the soldiers, cleaning up the wreckage of the demonic beasts, there were still many things to do. What happened over there? After that, Leonidas I looked in the direction of the pillar of light that was still continuing. Leonidas I shook his head silently. As the front line, all he needed to do was to defend. Anyway, King Gilgamesh in the Uruk must have seen it. There was no need for him to worry. Although the pterosaur acted as a carrier pigeon, it's still not as good as the wind demon. Leonidas I muttered to himself. He turned around and joined the ranks of cleaning up the battlefield. Leonidas I was right. The giant pillar of light covered such a wide area and was so powerful that the entire Mesopotamia could see it, not to mention the Uruk. The Uruk people all knelt on the ground. They all thought that God had appeared, and they all prayed devoutly. At the French skylight at the top of the tower, the sage king, Gilgamesh, who had returned from searching for the elixir of immortality for half a year, and the current chief priest, Siduri, stood together at the window and looked towards the southwest. Originally, Siduri had rushed over to report the earthquake to Gilgamesh in a panic. However, under the influence of Gilgamesh's calm aura, Siduri had also become calm. When the earthquake gradually subsided and the pillar of light slowly faded, Gilgamesh finally spoke. Hyunryong's return has already caused such a huge impact. How ostentatious! Upon hearing this, Siduri's face lit up with joy. King Gilgamesh. Are you saying that Lord Hyunryong is back? Siduri was still wondering what made King Gilgamesh put aside his work and observe. It turned out that Lord Hyunryong was back. Since Wuming and Gorgon were both injured, Gorgon was seriously injured and returned to his temple to recuperate, and Wuming directly disappeared. The Uruk people fell into a temporary panic. After that, it was Gilgamesh who spoke again to cheer the people up. The people who had not completely separated themselves from the gods naturally fell into a depression once again because of Hyunryong's return to fight against the enemy. The most serious one was Siduri. As a god who sincerely cared for the people of Mesopotamia, Hyunryong's temple was close to the Uruk and he worked for the people. Later on, he almost replaced the idol Ishtar as the Uruk city god. This made Siduri's devotion to Hyunryong surpass that of most other gods. She was even willing to sacrifice her life for Hyunryong. However, Hyunryong sacrificed himself in the process of fighting against the enemy god and disappeared again. How could this not make Siduri's heart not ache? However, as the chief priest, Siduri could not abandon her duties because of heartache and sadness. Perhaps because Gilgamesh noticed that Hyunryong's departure was a big blow to the Uruk, King Gilgamesh made a new speech to cheer up Siduri and even the entire Uruk people and restore their previous extremely optimistic state. However, this did not mean that Siduri would not be sad about Hyunryong's departure. Almost every few days, Siduri would go to the temple abandoned by Hyunryong to pray. Therefore, Siduri was quite excited when she heard the news of Hyunryong's return. Probably Hyunryong wanted to go from the highlands in the southwest to the Uruk, but he encountered Tiamat's 11 magical beasts and fought with them. As Gilgamesh spoke, he returned to the throne behind him, sat down, picked up the clay tablet, and began to deal with various affairs. "My king, should I send someone to welcome Lord Xianlong?" Greeting the return of a deity that he had devoutly believed in was something that should be done. Not only that, since Wuming could fight with the enemy in the southwest, it must mean that there were enemies there. Since there were enemies, it was hard to guarantee that there would be reinforcements. In the current situation, if more than half of the 11 sons of Tiamat besieged Hyunryong, there would definitely be an accident. A lot of things had happened in the past 6 months. After Gorgon was seriously injured by Wuming's self-destruction, he had been holed up in his temple in the fir forest all day long. Because of the battle between Hyunryong and Gorgon, the magical beasts produced by Gorgon were basically affected, causing a lot of casualties. The north wall was not attacked for a long time. However, on a certain day 3 months later, a large number of magical beasts flocked to the north wall, and there were 11 magical beast commanders with strength comparable to gods. They called themselves the 11 sons of Tiamat, and the existence that looked like Enkidu was one of them. If King Gilgamesh did not summon many servants to assassinate the 11 commanders at the cost of sacrificing themselves to buy time for the north wall, perhaps the north wall would have been breached by now. Even if Gorgon himself came in person, he would definitely choose to retreat after receiving that attack. "Don't worry about Hyunryong," Gilgamesh said while constantly changing the clay tablet in his hand. One by one, he quickly corrected the instructions on the clay tablet. Gilgamesh saw the attack just now. That kind of attack was like the combination of multiple military noble phantoms. Even Gorgon would certainly be injured, let alone the magical beasts. But, Siduri still wanted to say something, but at this time, Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked up as if he could not stand Siduri anymore. Which servants are there in the south now? Chapter 896. Siduri's veiled face revealed a hint of joy. Judging from King Gilgamesh's words, did he agree to support and welcome Lord Hyunryong back? Yes, my king. Chaldea has just been sent by my king to the southern jungle to support the feathered serpent god. However, before Siduri could finish her sentence, Gilgamesh instantly interrupted her. Then let Chaldea welcome Hyunryong. Moreover, they have formed a bond with Hyunryong. They are the best candidates. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he once again picked up the clay tablet with his clawed hand. At this moment, there were still many things waiting for him to deal with in Mesopotamia. He couldn't afford to waste a single second. If he delayed any longer, he wouldn't even have time to sleep. Bond. My king, are you referring to the matter of the master of Chaldea possessing Lord Hyunryong's scale? Siduri clearly remembered that when Merlin brought Chaldea and her party to the Uruk, when they approached the shrine of Hyunryong in the Uruk, the girl took out the scale because it was hot and was coincidentally discovered by Siduri. After seeing that the scale was connected to the shrine, Siduri reported the matter to King Gilgamesh. According to the master of Chaldea, the scale was a gift from a friend who had helped them in other singularities. It was said that it would be useful in this singularity. Siduri still remembered King Gilgamesh's reaction at that time. After learning about this matter, King Gilgamesh did not seem to care. However, when he met the master of Chaldea, the first thing he asked was to see the hot dragon scale. He was obviously anxious, but he had to show a calm expression. Siduri did not know what to say about King Gilgamesh. After confirming that it was a dragon scale condensed from Hyunryong's magic, Gilgamesh was very happy to give the master of Chaldea and her followers an extraordinary trial. At that time, Siduri wondered if King Gilgamesh wanted to kill Chaldea and her party. After that, it was said that the people in the Chaldea organization were in an uproar. It would be a joke if they died in the hands of their allies after passing through 6 singularities. However, because of this, Chaldea also confirmed that King Gilgamesh was really a former tyrant. In short, a certain person who sounded like a loser to Siduri had a shadow in her heart. In the end, it was King Gilgamesh's court magician, Merlin, who brought Chaldea and her party back. Under the condition of not touching King Gilgamesh's bottom line, he helped Chaldea and her party a little. This allowed Chaldea and her party to barely pass the trial. This king is especially strict with outsiders who suddenly join because the entire Mesopotamia has become extremely dangerous. Although you barely passed, you completed it with the help of Merlin. This is enough to prove that you are not qualified. You should train in the Uruk for a period of time first, bastards. Siduri wanted to complain. It was King Gilgamesh who was interested in Chaldea and her party because King Hyunryong entrusted them with a dragon scale and went overboard. However, what King Gilgamesh said was true. The current situation in Mesopotamia was extremely dangerous. The strengthened demons and the number of demon commanders that still existed not only made the northern wall miserable, but also made Uruk, the rear of the army, constantly vigilant. One of the 11 sons of Tiamat, a four-legged serpent-type demon known as Musu Hushio. Half a year ago, when the 11 demon commanders appeared, they led a large number of Musu Hushio to attack Uruk from underground. Because of the sudden attack, they had to sacrifice a servant called Saber, swordsman, summoned by King Gilgamesh to suppress the demons that attacked from the ground. However, the demonic beast commander who personally led the demonic beasts to attack was also killed. In terms of war losses, neither side gained an advantage. The demonic beasts lost an extremely powerful demonic beast commander, and the human side lost an equally powerful servant. Although there were no more incidents of monsters attacking from underground, Gilgamesh still carried out a defense against the monsters underground. In a very short period of time, he successfully developed a powerful barrier called Nabiston's Tooth and buried it under the Uruk. Not only that, King Gilgamesh also carried out a series of defenses against the sky, the two rivers, the Persian Gulf, and even the highlands in the southwest. Even Siduri had to admit that King Gilgamesh was really a genius. But strangely, since the beginning of Mu Xiu's surprise attack on the Uruk, there were no such monster attacks in the past 6 months. Perhaps they were too cautious, but almost all the monsters attacked from the north. However, King Gilgamesh proposed the possibility of waiting for the humans to relax and then take them down in one fell swoop. Therefore, even if there were no monster attacks, they had to be vigilant in the rear. Therefore, when Gilgamesh said that the master of Chaldea was not qualified, he was not completely looking for an excuse. There was a certain reason behind it. After that, King Gilgamesh arranged the so-called Chaldean embassy for Chaldea's group in the Uruk. He really let them do a variety of things in the Uruk, such as building walls, weeding, feeding livestock, shearing sheep, removing rats in the sewer, and other things that were quite boring but interesting. The significance of this was that Chaldea's master and her followers had successfully integrated into the Uruk. And just yesterday, after Siduri reported the situation of Chaldea's master to King Gilgamesh received information from the Quetzalcoatl through the small pterosaur. A large number of monsters had been discovered in the southern jungles, and there were even signs of monsters coming ashore from the Persian Gulf. However, the monsters had become their own people, and the Quetzalcoatl worked together with Gilgamesh's soldiers to repel them. Although such a situation was rare, monsters would invade from the southwest jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. But since it was related to monsters, the Quetzalcoatl would still report it to Gilgamesh. However, Gilgamesh did not pay much attention to it. After all, monsters did try to invade from the south jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. Therefore, after realizing that Chaldea's group had enough time to train, Gilgamesh gave them their first mission, which was to support the Quetzalcoatl in the south. However, Gilgamesh understood one thing at this moment. Through the light beam on the southwest plateau today, he could confirm that the monster commanders seemed to be planning something again. However, when he thought about how they had coincidentally bumped into Wuming, Gilgamesh faintly wanted to laugh. This was the so-called coming at the right time. Chapter 897. Didn't Merlin and the servant he brought back also go with Chaldea's people? Use the small pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl to convey the news to Merlin, and let him tell the Chaldea's people that after meeting with Hyunryong, they must listen to Hyunryong's instructions just like this king. Although the Uruk also had carrier pigeons, ever since the Quetzalcoatl turned against them, the Uruk began to use the small communication pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl. It had to be said that this small pterosaur was better than the carrier pigeons in all aspects. That's all. We'll talk about other things when Hyunryong returns to the Uruk. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he stopped talking and focused on dealing with various matters on the clay tablet. Yes, King, I'll do it right away. Siduri responded and left the throne room. Southern jungle. The hot and humid environment made the group of people who came from the Uruk to support them suffer. Especially Gadotsi, the people accompanying her were either servants or subservants. Only Gadotsi was a pure human. Moreover, the magic concentration in Kanzaki was much higher than in the sixth singularity. If it weren't for the magic dress specially made for Gadotsi by Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps Gadotsi wouldn't be able to move so freely in this singularity. However, even with the magic dress, the magic atmosphere of Kanzaki and the humid tropical jungle still made Gadotsi breathless. Leopard Man, San, haven't we arrived yet? Matthew, who noticed that his senpai was quite uncomfortable at the moment, asked the servant leading them in front, the god Sama who claimed to be the Leopard Man but seemed to be a comedic character. As Matthew understood, this servant looked like an older girl wearing a leopard costume. The item on the ground that looked like a spear was more like a large toy than a weapon. Right away, the Leopard Man, who was defined as a strange servant by Matthew, turned around and smiled at Matthew rather reluctantly. Matthew was already immune to the leopard man's joking because she said this sentence several times. However, Matthew still noticed that the leopard man's expression was slightly depressed at the moment. "Leopard man, San, are you okay?" Matthew, who fully displayed his little personality, asked with concern. "It's okay, how could the leopard man be frightened by the earthquake just now? Ah ha ha ha." There was no doubt that Miss Leopard Man was frightened. That was what Matthew judged. The appearance of the giant pillar of light caused the earthquake, and at that time, they happened to meet the leopard man outside the jungle who was about to lead them. Because the sudden earthquake was very close to the southern jungle, Gadotsi directly fell to the ground. Matthew barely supported his body to protect Gadotsi, so as to prevent the surrounding trees from collapsing and causing harm to Gadotsi. However, it seemed that the earth and trees in Kanagawa were extremely tough, and there were no signs of trees collapsing or the ground cracking. In the end, the leopard people, who had senses that surpassed that of wild beasts, were the ones who received the most severe effects, to the point of being ridiculously severe. The leopard man was so scared that he buried his head in the ground. Although this ostrich-like behavior was worthy of ridicule, what was more worthy of ridicule was that burying one's head in the ground should be more affected by the earthquake. After all, it was the earth that was shaking. In short, after the earthquake ended for some time, the leopard man pulled his head out of the ground in a daze, and he looked like he was about to leave. After that, when the leopard man led the way for them, he looked like he was trembling with fear. In short, the leopard man at this moment was very unreliable. Matthew, who understood this, sighed helplessly, but even if they didn't know when they would reach their destination, they still had to go on. Thinking of this, Matthew looked at the cloaked girl who followed them silently behind them, the servant who claimed to be Anna. Anna, who was good at using sides, didn't panic much during the earthquake. She was almost unaffected by the earthquake. It could only be said that even if she was petite and looked weak, she was still worthy of being called a servant. Subconsciously, Matthew felt that he was still immature. As for the leopard man, Matthew subconsciously ignored her. "Miss Anna, do you know where Merlin went?" Matthew asked Anna. Originally, as a court magician, Merlin should have stayed in the Uruk temple to serve King Gilgamesh, but under King Gilgamesh's order, May, as a court magician, and Anna followed Gadotsi and Matthew to the southern jungle. As for why Matthew asked Anna this, it was entirely because Merlin told Anna to remember to protect the two of them during the earthquake and quickly left. "I don't know, probably he went to the epicenter." Hearing Matthew's question, Anna's purple eyes under the cloak looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before, and no one knew what she was thinking. Seeing this, Matthew also looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before. When Merlin left, he did go in that direction. Probably he really went to investigate the situation. Mr. Merlin is really reliable. Matthew thought so. After that, Matthew saw that Anna didn't answer anymore, so he didn't ask anymore. After all, a good relationship has to be done step by step. On the other side, in the place where the giant pillar of light disappeared, Merlin, unlike Castor, walked quickly in the mountains and jumped to a relatively high mountain. Oh, this is really amazing. Fufu heard the sound of someone wanting to kick someone. Not far from Merlin, there was a huge pit that could be called a basin. This huge pit was the trace of the giant pillar of light. Around the huge pit and even in the center, there was a thick black smoke, but the black smoke was dissipating quickly. If you don't look closely, you won't see it at all. As expected of a Villo, it seems that those magical beasts should have been killed by you. Merlin didn't know who he was talking to, but his tone of praise was a little funny. You mean the kobold? Wu Ming's figure slowly came out of the smoke. Although he came out of the smoke, Wu Ming's clothes didn't have the slightest trace of contamination. Merlin judged that Wuming probably wrapped himself with magic to avoid being contaminated by the smoke. But this guy is really strong, worthy of being one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Merlin, who was looking in the direction of Wuming, slightly widened his eyes. Because behind Wuming, a huge kobold body was following Wuming. No, it wasn't following Wuming. Instead, it was being dragged by Wuming with one hand. Chapter 898. Wuming dragged the blackened world of Warcraft Eulidium with one hand. When he walked out of the smoke, Wuming threw Eulidium heavily. Thump. There was a loud noise, and dust flew everywhere. With Wuming's strength and Eulidium's body weight, a huge crater was created on the ground. As expected of our British silver dragon, Vero. Speaking of which, is he dead? Merlin jumped down from the high ground and walked on hurriedly to the large piece of mixed black flesh. Although I think it should be dead after taking that hit, it's a pity. Wuming shook his head. This guy was still alive. It could only be said that it was worthy of being the original demon born from Tiamat. Its body was so strong that it was able to survive such an attack. Wuming's attack just now was multiple super-level magic, and this guy was still alive. Even if it was a servant, it would not survive such an attack, unless it had a special skill or a special noble artifact. But those mass-produced Eulidium should be dead. If multiple super-level magic couldn't even kill a mass-produced Eulidium, then it would be too cheap. It's not hard to understand why this guy is still alive. This is the so-called prototype. According to King Gilgamesh and my judgment, they are indeed Tiamat's the 11 sons. Merlin poked Eulidium with his staff and told Wuming his information. I've fought with it before, so I'm pretty sure of this. Then, Wuming walked to Eulidium's head and created a weapon with a high-grade item. He was ready to pierce Eulidium's brain through its eyes and kill it completely. Why did you abandon your mission and come to me? The reason Merlin appeared in this place must be because he had a mission. Otherwise, why would a court magician like him come to this border? While Wuming was talking, Eulidium's body shook a little. It was the desire to live. Wait. Wait. If it's not dead, don't kill it. Merlin grabbed Wuming's hand and quickly stopped Wuming's action, saving Eulidium, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Eulidium, who was still conscious, heaved a sigh of relief. Thanks to the Mother Goddess, Eulidium could breathe more air between heaven and earth. It felt like he was in the embrace of the Mother Goddess. It's Tiamat's son, and it's an existence that can be communicated with. It's a pity to kill it. In other words, Merlin wanted to take Eulidium as a prisoner to obtain information. Let me say this first. I don't think you can get any useful information. Wuming knew what Merlin wanted to do. It was nothing more than to use an illusion to obtain information. However, Wuming didn't think highly of Merlin, or rather, he didn't think highly of the magical beast. Wuming didn't think that this magical beast had any information in its head. The plan of the magical beasts was nothing more than to attack the humans. As the saying goes, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Silent Wonder wasn't exaggerating. Since Silent Wonder had returned, he wasn't afraid of not being able to stop the attack of the magical beasts, even if it was a strengthened version of the magical beasts. No, Villo. A lot has happened in the 6 months you left Uruk. The magical beasts have undergone earth-shattering changes, and they have caused a very serious impact on this world. At that moment, Merlin didn't care about Eulidium's presence. He told Wuming some things. Half a year ago, 11 magical beast commanders who called themselves the 11 sons of Tiamat appeared. In order to eliminate the magical beast commanders, a magical beast commander attacked the Uruk and killed all his servants. The Sage King summoned new servants and established new defense systems in the sky, rivers, lakes, underground, and so on. Although it was just a general description and didn't explain the details, if the audience was Wuming, they would definitely understand. Don't think that it's easy for you to defeat Eulidium. This is a magical beast comparable to a god-level servant. Wu Ming was also aware of this fact. Previously, Eulidium had used only his body to resist the multiple supreme-level spells he had cast. Although Eulidium was already half-dead, the fact that he could withstand multiple supreme-level spells without dying was enough to prove his strength as a demon commander. Moreover, the servant summoned by King Gilgamesh basically killed a few magical beast commanders at the cost of 2 to 1 or even 3 to 1. That was why Gilgamesh chose to summon new servants. After all, there was a shortage of manpower. It seemed that the Uruk side was able to eliminate the magical beast commander that attacked the Uruk in a suicidal manner. It could be said that they took a big advantage. However, Wu Ming said this. I really didn't mean to underestimate the magical beast commander. He didn't underestimate the magical beast commander. This made Merlin feel very helpless, so Merlin continued to explain. Since the magical beast commander has good wisdom, then we can't treat the magical beasts as beasts. Merlin's implication was that they must treat the other side as a country where soldiers are magical beasts. Since they could capture one of the generals alive, naturally, they couldn't kill it easily. They had to squeeze out the last bit of value before killing it. If this kobold Eulidium knew about this, he would definitely call Merlin a monster. Anyway, I didn't mean to refute you. You can do whatever you want. Shrugging his shoulders, Wu Ming walked to the side and removed the weapon in his hand. The weapon turned into blue magic particles and dissipated. Yes, you've helped me a lot, Merlin nodded with a smile, then walked to the front of Eulidium, who had lost the ability to resist. Then, he gently tapped Eulidium's head with his staff. All right, Eulidium of Warcraft, relax. I'll be gentle. I'll take care of you like a dream. Then, Eulidium fell into an illusion that Wu Ming could not see. After about a minute or two, Merlin dispelled the hallucinating spell, and the last trace of Eulidium's life force dissipated. What did you do to it? Wu Ming glanced at the lifeless Eulidium, then looked at Merlin strangely. Ahahaha, nothing, Merlin laughed proudly, which made Wu Ming speechless. It had to be said that in comparison, Merlin was even more ruthless than Wu Ming. Anyway, I've already obtained information about the magical beasts. Then, Merlin quietly looked at Wu Ming. How about it, Villo? Do you want to hear it? Wu Ming snapped his fingers in response to Merlin. Paw! The instant he snapped his fingers, Eulidium's corpse instantly burst into flames. Although Eulidium had said that he wanted to eat Wu Ming was not perverted enough to eat Eulidium. However, the sudden burst of flames gave Merlin a fright. Clearly, this was Wu Ming's answer to Merlin's question. Okay, calm down, I'll tell you now. As the flames burned, Merlin told him the information he had obtained from Eulidium's mind. Chapter 899. The magical beasts are preparing to attack the north wall and destroy it in one fell swoop. Is that so? Wu Ming replied to Merlin unhappily. After all, this didn't seem to be any important information. Not only that, the magical beasts are also preparing to launch a fierce feint attack on humans from the mountains in the northeast, the Persian Gulf in the southeast, and the highlands in the southwest. Depending on the conditions, they will turn the feint attack into their main force. If that's the case, we will be in danger. The strengthened magical beasts posed a great threat to humans. If 2 or 3 people could barely deal with an ordinary magical beast in the past, now it would take nearly 10 people to deal with an ordinary magical beast. Moreover, if it weren't for King Gilgamesh calmly issuing new defense regulations and strengthening the defenses of the North Wall and even other areas, the Uruk wouldn't have been able to hold on for more than half a year. But even so, the North Wall could only barely hold on. It wouldn't be surprising if it was broken through at any time. And if the number of magical beasts was large enough to besiege the Uruk from all directions, the humans in Mesopotamia would be completely finished. Merlin told Wuming about this analysis and also some details about the magical beasts, reminding Wuming not to underestimate them. I see, it's already that serious. At this moment, Wuming had a thorough understanding of the current situation. Wuming even wondered if Gydia had made some changes to the last singularity. Then, Wuming realized a problem. Speaking of which, does the commander of the magical beasts want to break the agreement of the three goddesses and include the Quetzalcoatl in the attack? Or has the fact that the Quetzalcoatl changed sides been exposed? The mountains in the southwest were adjacent to the forest of the Quetzalcoatl. Even if they went around the edge of the Uruk, they would still be considered to have stepped into the territory of the Quetzalcoatl. However, if they did so, they would be considered to have crossed the border. Therefore, if they wanted to cross the border and attack the Uruk from the southwest, they would have to face the wrath of the Quetzalcoatl. Although the commander of the beasts was at the level of a deity, the Quetzalcoatl was still one of the three goddesses in the alliance, an existence equal to Gorgon. Since they were intelligent, they wouldn't do something so ridiculous. Because the goddess of the underworld is unable to leave the underworld, the magical beast commanders haven't had any designs on her for the time being. I don't know whether the feathered god has been exposed or not, but from Ulidim's memories, the feathered god has indeed been included in their list of targets to be destroyed along with the humans. Through Ulidim's memories, Merlin knew that there would be a new magic beast commander coming to support Ulidim, preparing to annihilate the humans along with the feathered god. As for whether or not the feathered god's betrayal of the three goddesses' alliance was exposed, Merlin had no way of knowing. If the feathered god has to face more than 3 magical beast commanders, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the feathered god to deal with them, Merlin judged. The Quetzalcoatl that appeared in this world was only a servant. Even if it was a servant at the level of a god, it was still a clone. When facing the 11 sons of Tiamat, it was inevitable that it would not be able to do much. It's better not to underestimate the feathered god. Wuming did not think that the feathered god, as the main deity of South America, would be weak. Although Wuming used Enkidu to capture the feathered god at that time, if the feathered god had refused, the result would have been unpredictable. The most important thing was that the feathered god's heart was with the humans. Wuming only told the feathered god the fact that there is still hope for the humans, so the feathered god finally chose to compromise. King Gilgamesh also has great expectations for the feathered god. After the feathered god defected to our side, Gilgamesh let the feathered god expand the scope of the jungle, including the entire south and southwest into the feathered god's jungle. This is to guard against the magical beasts that try to bypass the north wall from the southwest plateau. Letting the feathered god guard the southwest was part of Gilgamesh's defense plan. However, it's better to be cautious. The servants on the human side dared to gamble, but the humans could not afford to gamble at the moment. If they failed, it was likely that they would lose everything. I'll go back to Uruk first and see the king. The current situation was not something that Wuming and Merlin could decide. They had to discuss it with Gilgamesh. By the way, why did you come to the remote border? Merlin didn't answer this question from the beginning. If it wasn't for the fact that Wuming was going to Uruk to find Gilgamesh, he almost forgot to ask Merlin the purpose of coming here. Actually, I accompanied the people of Chaldea to support the feathered god. When Merlin said that, Wuming's eyes lit up. Sure enough, Tachika and the others have arrived. They just arrived in Uruk not long ago. After being trained by King Gilgamesh, they began to carry out the king's first order. And that order was to support the jungle in the south. Sure enough, the speed of time passing is not the same. Wuming said to himself for a while. The speed of time passing was not the same, Wuming already knew that, so Wuming didn't make a fuss about it. If that's the case, then I won't go to Uruk for now. No matter what, he had to meet Gadotzi and the others first. Gah! At this moment, a small pterosaur descended from the sky and came to Merlin's side. Oh, is this news from King Gilgamesh? Merlin untied the clay tablet fixed on the small pterosaur's back and handed it to Wuming. It must be related to you, you can take a look first. Indeed, as Merlin guessed, the clay tablet said that Merlin and Chaldea were to find Wuming and meet up with him, and they were to follow Wuming's instructions in the following operation. It's just for you to meet up with me. Wuming didn't read it out loud. After reading it, he crushed the clay tablet. Hey, I haven't read it yet. If King Gilgamesh knows about this, he will definitely blame me. Merlin looked like he was going to suffer. Don't I know you? Your skin is thicker than Chaldea. Wuming's implication was that Gilgamesh's scolding would not affect Merlin, and Merlin would still eat and drink as usual. As expected of my best friend, Villo, you really understand me, ha ha ha. Merlin laughed shamelessly. Let's go find Tachika and the others. Ignoring Merlin, Wuming stepped forward and walked in the direction of the jungle. Not good. Merlin's sudden shout made Wuming turn around helplessly. What's wrong? Because I fell behind halfway, I'm not sure where the destination is. Sorry. Merlin had an apologetic expression, but no matter how Wuming looked at it, Merlin's face was full of annoyance. If I'm not mistaken, it's Eridu. I've been there before, follow me. Thank you so much, as expected of my best friend. Accompanied by Merlin's strange laughter, the two entered the jungle from the opposite direction. Chapter 900. Oh. So this is Eridu. Sure enough, due to the influence of the jungle, everywhere looks like a primeval forest. Merlin, who had followed Wuming to Eridu, exclaimed in surprise. If it's as you said, then the leopard man has already brought Tachika and the others here. They're most likely here. Wuming walked into Eric Metropolis. The people who were working hard to make a living were shocked when they saw Wuming. It's Hyunryong Sama. Hyunryong Sama. Hyunryong Sama has come to Eridu. But I heard that Hyunryong Sama sacrificed himself to fight the demonic beasts, you idiot. Hyunryong Sama is such a powerful person, how could he sacrifice himself for something like that? I told you that's just a rumor. Hyunryong Sama is standing right in front of us. Hyunryong Sama. Ignoring some of the comments, the people of Eridu knelt down and started praying and cheering for Wuming. Wuming didn't stop the people from praying and cheering. Or rather, he couldn't stop them at all. This was the end of the Gods' era, but the end of the Gods' era was still in the Gods' era. Stopping the people from praying, supporting, and cheering for the gods was the same as killing them. Therefore, Wuming didn't try to stop them. After all, everything had to be done step by step. Even if the Gods' era was about to disappear, it was still the same. Wuming nodded at the people who were praying and cheering. He quickly left the place where the people were praying and headed towards the feathered serpent god's temple. You're so popular here, Merlin, who had also caught up with them, said in surprise as he walked beside Wuming. Although Wuming was well liked in Mesopotamia as a Hyunryong, the humans in Idu treated Wuming a little too well. After all, I was the one who pulled the Quetzalcoatl into the alliance. Only then did the Quetzalcoatl promise not to terrorize Eric Metropolis and you are. They must be very grateful to me for that. Wuming did not think much of it. However, it was precisely because the Quetzalcoatl was no longer terrorizing them that Gilgamesh was relieved to let the Quetzalcoatl manage the southern cities temporarily. Ha ha ha. In that case, the feathered serpent god will become your stepping stone. Wuming only smiled at Merlin's debauchery. Be careful, the feathered serpent god might hear you and give you a wrestling combo. At that moment, Merlin put away his smile and became serious, which was rare for him. However, it was not because Merlin was afraid of the feathered serpent god's wrestling combo, but because Gadotzi and the others appeared. Assassin Senior Villo. Gerdotzi and Mashu looked at Wu Ming in surprise. They fell into a state of shock. Long time no see, Tachika, Matthew. After leaving the residential area of Idu, Wu Ming, Merlin, Gerdotzi, and Matthew went to the special house that the leopard man prepared in advance for Gerdotzi and the others near the temple of the feathered serpent god. They sat around a stone square table. Originally, Gerdotzi and Matthew were resting here, but the people working near the temple bustled toward the city center, and while running, they said, Hyunryong Sama is here. After that, the two, who were not familiar with Hyunryong, learned from Roman that Hyunryong was the most mysterious and powerful god among the Sumer gods. Hyunryong should also be a servant. I detected a very dense mana source here, which is probably emitted by Hyunryong. According to my judgment, Hyunryong is probably one of us. The two, who were a little interested in Hyunryong, and Roman proposed to meet this one of us, so Gerdotzi and Matthew went out of the house to see what Hyunryong looked like. As a result, they didn't see Hyunryong, but they saw an acquaintance. At this moment, Gerdotzi, who was in a good mood, took the initiative to ask a question, regardless of whether Hyunryong was Hyunryong or not. Assassin, did you come here to help us? How did you come to this singularity? Matthew was also quite curious about this. The Winterwood singularity aside, the American singularity appeared because of Queen Maeve who held the Holy Grail. And Wu Ming could appear in the Middle East singularity probably because he should be the same as Bedivere. At this moment, the Vilo Senior, who could appear in the Mesopotamia singularity in BC made Matthew quite curious. It's normal that you don't know. Wu Ming didn't tell the two about his other identity, and when they met just now, Wu Ming had left the city center, and there were no citizens praying around him. Gerdotzi and Matthew didn't know the identity of Wu Ming and Hyunryong. Actually, before Wu Ming could say anything, Merlin rushed to answer. He's a local, it's normal for him to appear here. And Merlin, who rushed to answer, was still playing dumb and keeping them in suspense. Mr. Merlin. What does this mean? Matthew was quite puzzled. Not only Matthew, but Gerdotzi was also puzzled. Then, Gerdotzi looked at her bracelet. Doctor, do you know what Merlin means? However, Roman, who was in Chaldea, didn't answer. Doctor. Doctor. Mashu also shouted a few words. Is he asleep? Gerdotzi guessed. Yes, this is the almighty Leonardo da Vinci. Dr. Roman found it difficult to accept the reality and went to make coffee. Let this genius answer your doubts. Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from the bracelet instead of Roman. According to the test, the magic source that was suspected to be Hyunryong was actually emitted by the Vilo. In other words, Dr. Roman's judgment was wrong. Gerdotzi and Matthew didn't think there was a problem. However, Wu Ming, who saw this scene, smiled helplessly. These two little cuties were so natural that they didn't realize the real problem. Merlin, too, burst out laughing at this. What's the problem? Gerdotzi was even more puzzled. She felt that what the others were discussing was not the same as what she and Matthew were discussing. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci told Matthew and Gerdotzi the correct answer. Tachika, Matthew, it's not that Roman's judgment was wrong, it's because the Vilo is Hyunryong. Leonardo da Vinci shut his mouth, Wu Ming shook his head helplessly, and Merlin also stopped laughing. The whole room was replaced by silence. In other words, the Vilo is the mysterious Uruk Hyunryong. Dr. Roman, who came back from making coffee, said in shock. Hey. It could be said that Gerdotzi and Matthew finally experienced the feeling when Dr. Roman's mentality exploded. It was worth celebrating. Chapter 901. I'm sorry, I'm really a Uruk Hyunryong. I'm really sorry that I didn't tell you before, Wu Ming said apologetically. However, Wu Ming couldn't be blamed. It wasn't something worth bragging about. After interacting with Gadotsi and the rest for a while, Wuming had subconsciously forgotten that they didn't know about his other identities. Wuming had fully proved this point in the American and Middle Eastern singularities. Hyunryong is the most mysterious existence in the Sumer pantheon. He is so mysterious that his real name hasn't been passed down. Only Hyunryong, which is similar to a title, exists. This has led to a lot of rumors about Hyunryong's real name. There are even rumors that Hyunryong is the son of Tiamat, Ramu. Roman, who had returned to his seat, began to explain to everyone the information about Hyunryong recorded in Chaldea. Personally, I don't agree that Hyunryong is the magical beast Ramu born by Tiamat, but I'm more inclined to believe that Hyunryong is the son of Tiamat. Roman's voice kept coming from Gadotsi's bracelet. Gadotsi, Matthew, and even Merlin, as well as a petite girl whose face was covered by a hood, all listened silently as if they were listening to a story. According to the records of mythology, Hyunryong was once feared and respected by powerful gods such as Godin, wind god Enlil, and water god Anki. Because Hyunryong's shrine was located in Uruk, even the position of the Uruk city god was occupied by Hyunryong during the late period of the god's era. Wuming, who was listening by the side, had a strange and awkward feeling. Moreover, these sayings were definitely, absolutely, definitely made up by later generations. He had clearly left before Gilgamesh found the elixir of immortality, and he had no intention of competing with Ishtar for the position of the Uruk city god. Many people think that Hyunryong was treated so politely by the gods because of his noble birth. Only the son of Tiamat could be respected by Godin. In addition, Hyunryong did not pass down his real name. Therefore, some people think that Hyunryong's true form should be Tiamat's son, Ramu. But, Doctor, I remember that there are two Ramu, right? Matthew had doubts about this. Indeed, as Matthew said, there are two existences named Ramu in Mesopotamia. One is Ramu, who was also the son of Tiamat, and gave birth to Godin and wind god Enlil. The other is Ramu, one of the 11 magical beasts that Tiamat gave birth to. However, these are just rumors, and the credibility is not high. Looking at Gadotsi and Matthew nodding like students in class, Wuming felt more than a little embarrassed. Not only were they rumors, but they were also completely fabricated by the later generations. Wuming did not interrupt Roman's scientific explanation. He just kept complaining in his heart. Although it is unknown when Hyunryong appeared in the eyes of the people, the period when Hyunryong faded from the eyes of the people was the period when King Gilgamesh was in power. That was the period when the gods gradually disappeared and the era of the gods gradually declined. According to the records, Hyunryong personally destroyed his own temple, hoping that humans would walk the path of breaking away from the gods. Although there were gods who agreed to the separation of humans and gods, their intentions were not strong. Hyunryong could be said to be the only god who took the initiative to strongly advocate for the separation of humans and gods. Wuming nodded silently. Although there was some content in this statement that was fabricated by the later generations, it was generally not much different from Wuming's thoughts. Wuming, who was an outsider, was included in the Sumer divine system. But even so, he was still not a god of Mesopotamia. Wuming, who had strong modern thinking, naturally advocated the separation of humans and gods. Therefore, although Hyunryong was revered by the other gods, there were not many who interacted with him. Hyunryong spent more time with humans, especially the hero King Gilgamesh. It was said that Gilgamesh was taken care of by Hyunryong when he was young. The relationship between the two could be said that Hyunryong was Gilgamesh's adoptive father. Wuming took care of the female Gilgamesh in the parallel world. Although that was the case, after the adjustment of the suppression force, as long as it was a world with the shape of the moon, regardless of whether it was a parallel world or not, there would be myths related to Hyunryong in Mesopotamia. Logically speaking, before Wuming came to this singularity, he had no contact with this male Gilgamesh. But whenever Wuming communicated with him, He felt a sense of familiarity, as if he had really taken care of this singularity before. Senior Villo is actually King Gilgamesh's adoptive father. Matthew, who understood this, was quite surprised. As for why he was surprised, he was naturally surprised by the sense of strangeness in it. The great silver dragon of Britain, the first knight of the Round Table, was actually the adoptive father of the most ancient hero King Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia. How could it not be strange? Roman also sighed helplessly. The legend of Villo Saransword, a knight of the Round Table, is that of a dragon who transformed into a human. Now it seems that this is not a legend but a fact. Probably Hyunryong went to ancient Britain after leaving Mesopotamia. This was the only explanation at present. Why don't we ask Assassin? Isn't he right in front of us? Gadotsi looked curiously at Wu Ming, who was sitting in the most inconspicuous position. Since the person involved was present, why not just ask him? Matthew and Roman, who was now in Chaldea, were both stunned. Because of Wu Ming's silence at the beginning, coupled with Roman's extensive scientific knowledge, Matthew and Roman had subconsciously forgotten that the person involved was present at the scene. It seems, that is indeed the case. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Yes. Why didn't I think of it? Damn it. Roman's deafening voice made Gadotsi subconsciously move her arm away. Great, it's good that the person involved is present. I really don't understand why the Uruk Hyunryong is a knight of the Round Table. Villo Sumer turned out to be a knight of the Round Table. This is so strange. Is it really okay for you to be so agitated? Wu Ming silently complained. You'll die of overwork if you're too conflicted, Roman. Wu Ming even heard Leonardo da Vinci's nonsensical teasing. How can it be so easy to die of overwork? If it was so easy, I don't know how many times I would have died of overwork. Ignoring the mutual teasing of the Chaldea duo, Matthew looked at Wu Ming with great seriousness. Senior Villo, what is the truth? Matthew's small eyes sparkled with interest. Ahem. Matthew, you have to know that the reason why mystery is because of its uncertainty and, most importantly, confidentiality. Chapter 902. Wu Ming coughed and pretended to be serious, which made Matthew sit up straight. Ah. Yes, I'm sorry, Villo-senpai, I've offended you. After all, the world of magic was all about concealment and mystery. It was likely that if the truth was exposed, it would have a certain impact on the Villo-senpai. Matthew thoughtfully made up an excuse for Wu Ming. Only Merlin looked like he wanted to laugh but didn't dare. It seemed that Merlin knew everything. Wu Ming looked at Merlin as if he was looking at a dead man, as if to say, if you dare to laugh or expose my information, I'll kill you. Anyway, let's talk about my problem later. Speaking of which, where did the feathered serpent god go? And where's the leopard man who brought you here? I don't see him either. We haven't seen the feathered serpent god. Maybe he's not here. As for Miss Leopard Man. Matthew looked cautious, so he was definitely not sure. After the leopard rested for a while, he roared and ran into the forest. The one who spoke was Miss Anna, whose face couldn't be seen clearly. Ah. Miss Anna, I'm sorry, I didn't notice you coming. Matthew was startled by Anna's voice, and he apologized guiltily. It's okay. It seemed that Anna didn't mind it very much. Assassin, let me introduce you. This is Anna, the Anna we met in Winterwood City, but she doesn't remember us. When we met Merlin, Anna was with Merlin. Yo, Anna, long time no see. Wu Ming greeted her as if they were old friends. Anna nodded silently to the powerful existence who had protected her master, Sakura Midu. Is this singularity Anna the one in Winterwood? It seemed that Gadotsi had thought of Anna as the Anna in Winterwood City from the very beginning. Of course it's Anna. It's not difficult to understand why Anna can appear in this singularity. Firstly, the goddess of magical beasts of the three goddesses alliance was Gorgon, who wielded Tiamat's authority. Secondly, the master of Anna in the Winterwood singularity, Sakura Midu, was sealed in the Holy Grail that Wuming had given to the fake Enkidu. It's not impossible for Anna's master to appear in this world. However, this was difficult for Godotzi and Matthew to comprehend. After all, they did not have enough information. But Miss Anna acted as if she didn't know us at all. She didn't talk to us at all. Matthew said weakly. I just hate humans. I didn't mean to avoid talking to you, Anna suddenly interrupted, although her explanation was full of contradictions. By the way, you should know Anna's real name, right? Godotzi and Matthew exchanged glances and nodded. As expected, Miss Anna is Medusa. Back in Winterwood City, Godotzi and the others did not interact much with Anna, so they did not get her real name from Anna. However, based on their encounter with Stheno and Euriley in Winterwood City, as well as the way the twin goddesses addressed and treated Anna, Roman guessed Anna's real name through future analysis. At this moment, Anna, who was called by her real name, did not show any emotion. It was as if she was not interested in anything. Do you know that the goddess of magical beasts is Gorgon, who wields Tiamat's authority? Ha! Matthew's exclamation told Wuming that she was indeed unaware of this. Indeed. Although we have some information, it's only a little. Part of the information about the goddess of magical beasts was heard from the civilians, Godotzi added. Although many people knew that the goddess of magical beasts was Gorgon, the civilians did not have a deep understanding of it. Whether it was Tiamat or the outer gods who wielded Tiamat's authority, as long as it was a goddess who could produce magical beasts, it was Tiamat to them. At most, it was Tiamat who changed her appearance. In short, it was true that the magical beasts that attacked them were produced by the mother goddess. It seems that Merlin hasn't told you yet. With a sigh, Wuming looked at Merlin. Godotzi and the others were unlikely to get information from Gilgamesh. After all, he was the most ancient hero king who approached Godotzi and the others as soon as he came up and immediately arranged for them to undergo training in the Uruk after confirming that they were unqualified. However, if it was Merlin, he should have known about this piece of information. Ahahaha, because King Gilgamesh told me not to disclose any information to Chaldea and the others who were training in the Uruk, I completely forgot about it over time. Merlin laughed and scratched the back of his head proudly. In short, let's analyze the current situation now. The scientific meeting immediately turned into an intelligence meeting, and Roman also abdicated his position and stopped talking. The Three Goddesses Alliance is the goddess of the underworld in Mesopotamia, the Quetzalcoatl in Central and South America, and the Greek goddess of monsters Gorgon, who holds Tiamat's authority. Godotzi and Mashu nodded. They were not surprised. It seemed that this was part of the information they had. The Quetzalcoatl was betrayed by me, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the ground. The biggest threat is the goddess of monsters, Gorgon, who holds Tiamat's authority. In the face of this biggest threat, my last spiritual base attempted to perish together with Gorgon's spiritual base, but unfortunately, the fake Enkidu came and stopped it. However, Wuming was more concerned about the fact that Gorgon, who was seriously injured at that time, recovered slowly and effectively. Was it the influence of Tiamat's authority or something else? While Wuming paused to think, Matthew raised his small hand and began to ask questions. That. Senior Villo, what do you mean by the spiritual base last time? After all, I'm Hyunryong from Mesopotamia. When a singularity appeared in Mesopotamia, I naturally came back to take a look. By the way, I appeared in Uruk one step earlier than Merlin. Yes. But it's a pity that Hyunryong, who appeared in Uruk one step earlier than me, left early last time, and he didn't even manage to perish together with me. What a pity! In response to Merlin's whispering, Wuming responded with a murderous glare. However, in Matthew's view, this scene was indeed a quarrel between friends. By the way, it's a great fate that Mr. Merlin and Senior Villo can meet in Uruk. The two of them were both subjects of King Arthur in Britain, and now they met in Uruk as subjects of King Gilgamesh. It was indeed a great fate. But in the end, whether it's in Britain or in Mesopotamia, I'm a level higher than Merlin. Wu Ming smiled proudly at Merlin. Thinking about it carefully, that's true. Gadotzi thought for a moment and nodded. In Britain, although Wu Ming and Merlin were both subjects of King Arthur, as the closest subjects of King Arthur, their status was not lower than Merlin's, and even higher. The difference was even greater in Uruk. Previously, Dr. Roman said that Hyunryong in Uruk is equivalent to King Gilgamesh's adoptive father, while Merlin was only King Gilgamesh's court magician. Although it wasn't a crushing victory, no matter how you looked at it, Wu Ming was superior to Merlin. Ha ha ha. You're still so merciless, my dear friend. Chapter 903. I think you've forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. In the past, Merlin had been taught a lesson by Wu Ming several times because of his excessive teasing. Perhaps it was a symbolic lesson that caused Merlin to become even worse. However, Wu Ming was too lazy to refute Merlin. It is said that the Knight of the Round Table Villo and the great wizard Merlin are close friends. It seems that it is true. Regarding friends, Wu Ming had to admit that Merlin was possibly, a friend of his for the time being. Wu Ming knew Merlin during the period of King Yusi. He also participated in the plan to create the Red Dragon bloodline. Although Merlin was sometimes disdainful, Wu Ming and Merlin had indeed become friends. That's right, Villo and I. No, I have to say Hyunryong now. Lord Hyunryong and I are indeed good friends, ha ha ha. Sure enough, if you give Merlin some face, he would be able to open a dye house. It's just Merlin. Breathe with gills in the future. Wu Ming directly gave Merlin a dead fish's eye. What the hell do you mean by breathing with gills, and my name is Merlin? Merlin, not Merman. Merlin waved his staff to express his dissatisfaction, but Wu Ming turned a blind eye. Sure enough, you two have a good relationship just like Matthew and me. Seeing this scene, Gadotzi smiled and immediately hugged Matthew. Say. Senior, please don't be like this. Pfft. Miss Anna, who was alone, couldn't help but make a sound. Oh. Even I want to have a good chat with my best friend. Roman from Chaldea also made a sound of dissatisfaction. Oh, if I remember correctly, Romani is someone who doesn't have that kind of beautiful existence. Damn it. Leonardo da Vinci. Don't expose me. It was about time for the farce to end. At this moment, Wu Ming coughed. Let's talk about my best friend later. Let's continue our conversation. Wu Ming knocked on the table, and a 3D map projection appeared in front of everyone. This was a map made by Wu Ming using magic. The mountains, plains, hills, and so on were clearly visible on the map. Even the Uruk and other cities were depicted very realistically, like a high-quality model. Oh! That's amazing! Gadotzi's clear eyes reflected the projected map, and she exclaimed in surprise. The Quetzalcoatl is on our side, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the underworld, so we don't have to worry about it for now. The original goddess of magical beasts was also severely injured when I left last time. It stands to reason that the situation at this moment shouldn't be so serious. Then, Merlin continued Wu Ming's words. Hyunryong's departure last time caused heavy damage to Gorgon, and countless magical beasts were also affected by the aftermath of the battle between Hyunryong and Gorgon. But 3 months ago, for some reason, a large number of strengthened magical beasts poured out of the fir forest. Not only did their physical fitness and size increase, but there were also new types of magical beasts. A large number of new magical beasts and strengthened magical beasts attacked the north wall and caused heavy damage to the north wall. Merlin recalled the reports from the front line and narrated little by little. These words were not only for Godotzi, but also for Wuming, who didn't know about these things. Then, 11 magical beasts commanders who claimed to be the sons of Tiamat appeared on the magical beasts front. That night, Mu Xiao led a large number of mass-produced magical beasts to raid the Uruk from the underground. Our side suffered heavy losses, and nearly one-third of the total population of the Uruk were killed. In the end, one of the magical beasts' commanders, Mu Xiao, was killed at the cost of sacrificing a servant. Many mass-produced magical beasts were beheaded. Godotzi and Matthew's expressions were slightly hazy after Merlin's words. All of this was seen by Wuming's eyes. Perhaps Godotzi and Matthew had learned from the Uruk survivors about the Uruk disaster 3 months ago. There should be many relatives of the victims among them. Godotzi and Matthew were extremely emotional. Perhaps both of them didn't feel good when they communicated with the relatives of the victims. Sure enough, even after experiencing 6 singularities, the ordinary human Godotzi and the pure Matthew still couldn't get used to sacrifice. Wuming walked behind Godotzi and Matthew, then stretched out his hand and rubbed their little heads. Don't worry, I wasn't there back then. Now that I'm back in the Uruk, I won't allow anyone to sacrifice themselves. This is the promise that Winterwood's assassin made to you, and it's also the agreement that the Knight of the Round Table Villo made with you. At the same time, this is also my promise to the people in the land of Mesopotamia who pray to the gods and believe in Hyunryong as a Uruk. Godotzi and Matthew were still in a daze at this moment, as if they couldn't react to Wuming's words. But it had to be said that Wuming's words did play a big role in comforting the two. At the very least, their expressions were no longer hazy, and they were full of energy again. Yeah. Assassin, I'll remember. Yes. Senior Villo, it's a promise. On the side, Anna, who saw this scene, was thinking about something, and at the same time, it attracted Wuming's attention. Anna, since I brought Sakura here, then I will be responsible for taking Sakura back. This is also my agreement with you. As you wish. However, the action of tightening the hood again to cover her face showed that Anna's heart was also fluctuating at this moment. Godotzi and Matthew were confused by the conversation between Wuming and Anna. However, before Wuming could explain, Merlin, who breathed through his gills, broke the beautiful atmosphere. Okay, can you let me continue? Everyone looked at Merlin with murderous eyes. Not only that, but Chaldea's Roman also scolded him. Merlin, you bastard, you really don't know how to read the atmosphere. You're as bad as the records say, damn it. Roman, who had been monitoring the situation in Chaldea's control room, was originally relieved. After all, Godotzi's happy mood was still helpful for Godotzi's safety. After all, there was a risk when humans performed race shift, and they might completely disappear into the past. Along the way from the 6 singularities, Roman had been using equipment to monitor Godotzi's physical condition. It turned out that a happy mood was beneficial for Godotzi's safety. However, Godotzi and Matthew understood Merlin very well. Forget it, Doctor. After all, Mr. Merlin is right. It was originally a meeting to share information. Even if Merlin didn't understand the atmosphere and interrupted, it was reasonable to say that there was nothing wrong. Moreover, there was a reason why Merlin had interjected, because the next topic will be even crueler, so be mentally prepared in advance. Chapter 904. King Gilgamesh, who was deeply aware of the seriousness of the demonic beast commander, resummoned 7 servants and made a plan with the newly summoned servants to attract and disperse the enemy. Together with the remaining servants of the previous summons, a total of 10 servants were dispatched to launch a decapitation operation on the demonic beast commander. 10 servants. Matthew and Godotzi were really shocked. After all, the number of servants was indeed too many. Although Gadotsi and Mashu did encounter a lot of servants in the first few singularities, those servants were either alone or in small groups. At most, Gadotsi could gather a lot of servants around himself with his master's identity. But in this singularity, King Gilgamesh, as a human in the singularity, had 10 servants under his command. How could this not be shocking? So that's why King Gilgamesh is sitting in Uruk as a magician. Roman from Chaldea also made a reasonable judgment on the posture of the sage king. It was because of the need to command the people that the hero king became the sage king. It was because of the need to summon servants to resist the demonic beasts that Gilgamesh changed from a warrior to a magician. So, the supply of magic for so many servants is supported by King Gilgamesh alone. Matthew's question made Gadotsi aware of the problem. After the growth of 6 singularities, Gadotsi also had a lot of understanding of the servant's contract and the supply of magic. Gadotsi was able to form a contract with many servants because of the magic support behind Chaldea. If it was really relying on Gadotsi to provide magic alone, as an ordinary human, she was afraid that she could not even support Matthew to fight. However, this was not Chaldea, but Mesopotamia in BC, and Gilgamesh did not have the magic support behind Chaldea like Gadotsi. In that case, the magic needed to form a contract with so many servants was all provided by Gilgamesh alone. Indeed, assuming that the servants rely on food to replenish their magic, and Gil only provides the magic to maintain the contract, that is quite a large amount of magic power. When Gilgamesh was suggested by Wuming to summon servants, he proposed that the magic source should be solved by Wuming, because Wuming was worried that providing a large amount of magic to the servants would overwhelm Gilgamesh. However, Wuming's proposal was rejected by Gilgamesh, coupled with the fact that Gilgamesh summoned new servants. The burden on him was not something that ordinary people could bear. King Gilgamesh is so great, I thought he was just a bad-tempered tyrant. Gadotsi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. Ha ha ha, if King Gilgamesh heard it, I'm afraid he would praise you for your honesty. After all, the gift that King Gilgamesh gave you was really rough. At that time, the trial that King Gilgamesh gave to Gadotsi really scared her. At that time, Gadotsi's face changed color. It was no wonder that Gadotsi had a bad impression of King Gilgamesh. No one would have a good impression of a guy who almost killed them when they first met, and Gadotsi was the same. However, listening to Merlin's words, Gadotsi's view of Gilgamesh has greatly changed. Gil won't care about your opinion of him, especially the current Sage King, don't think too much about it. Wuming rubbed Gadotsi's head and comforted her. I know. Gadotsi's cheeks were slightly red. Even after experiencing 6 singularities, Gadotsi was still an immature and cute little girl. Then, Wuming looked at Merlin and restarted the topic. If I didn't guess wrong, the result should not be ideal. That's right. We sacrificed 8 servants to kill 3 demonic beast commanders. Sacrificed 8 servants. Matthew's eyes widened. Only 3 demonic beast commanders? Gadotsi couldn't help but stand up and hit Wuming behind her. This result is too unsatisfactory. Chaldea's Roman couldn't help but make a helpless sound. Even Leonardo da Vinci, who was always smiling, couldn't smile at this moment. In addition to Merlin and Wuming who proposed that the result was not ideal, only Anna didn't have any emotional or physical fluctuations, but Anna's heart was probably not calm at this moment. Including the one that was sacrificed in the Uruk, the result was that a total of 9 servants were sacrificed, but only 4 demonic beast commanders were killed, and there were still 6 demonic beast commanders alive. Even so, there should be more than 2 servants in the Uruk. Wuming asked again. Ha! Gadotsi and Matthew were stunned again. The result is so miserable because Merlin deliberately said that to let you hear it. As Merlin said before, the next topic will be more cruel. In short, Merlin did it deliberately. As Wuming spoke, he glanced at Merlin who was wearing a mischievous smile. And there's one thing I'm sure of. Merlin definitely won't participate in the decapitation operation, so he won't be one of the surviving servants. In that case, the number of servants left in Uruk must be more than 2 mounts. And since there were more than 2 servants left, how could there be only 3 servants left? There must be more than that. Ha ha ha, well said, you are indeed my best friend. At this moment, there are still 10 servants left on the human side. There are still 10 servants left. This number is very optimistic for the current situation. This time, it was Roman's voice. Roman is right, after all, there are only 7 servants in the ordinary Holy Grail War. Wu Ming said in agreement. Then, Wu Ming looked at Merlin again. But you should have counted me, Merlin. Of course, after all, you are indeed a servant on our side, aren't you? Sure enough, Merlin was still the strongest when it came to trickery. Matthew and Gadotzi looked at each other. If that was the case, it was really bad. Perhaps Matthew, Anna, and even the leopard man were also included. But it seemed that Merlin was right. In short, let's talk about the remaining servants in addition to the few of you here. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. First of all, one must know yourself. In addition to you, me, Matthew, and Anna, there are Quetzalcoatl, Leopard Man, Leonidas I, who is in charge of defense in the North Wall, Nuwakamaruk and Musasobo Benkei, who are in the Uruk under the command of King Gilgamesh, and the last one, Zhuge Kong Ming. Zhuge Kong Ming. Chapter 905. Mr. Merlin, are you talking about Zhuge Kong Ming? Is it the military advisor from ancient China? Gadotzi and Matthew asked Merlin. Yes, it is the military advisor of the Shu Kingdom in ancient China, Zhuge Kong Ming. And the defense plan for the Uruk and the surrounding areas that were not invaded by the demonic beasts was discussed by King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kong Ming. After thinking about it carefully, it was indeed a reasonable explanation. After all, if it was really all up to King Gilgamesh, and he had to think about so many problems, he might really die from overwork. I heard that the military advisor had been guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death, not letting it be annexed by the powerful Wei Kingdom. It seems that Mr. Kong Ming is quite good at defense. In Matthew's view, being able to resist the demonic beasts in a situation where the human forces were so weak, and the people in the Mesopotamia could survive and even live in peace and contentment, not only highlighted the military advisor's resourcefulness, but also reflected the military advisor's achievements in guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death. Having said that, don't forget about the king of the Uruk who wanted to carry the world on his back, Matthew. Maybe Zhuge Kong Ming did play a big role, but Gilgamesh's role was certainly not less than Zhuge Kong Ming's. Villo Sr. is right. To be able to summon so many servants to resist the demonic beasts and establish the North Wall, King Gilgamesh is indeed not as good as Zhuge Kong Ming. It was not an exaggeration. In Wu Ming's view, even without Zhuge Kong Ming, Gilgamesh could still resist the attack of the demonic beasts and still ensure that the people under his rule could live in peace and contentment. But the price may be accelerated to death from overwork. By the way, we also met Zhuge Kong Ming when we were in the Winterwood Singularity. Do you remember Assassin? I don't know if it's the same person. Gadotzi thought of the Zhuge Kong Ming who used the modern magician's body in the Winterwood Singularity. Maybe it's the real Zhuge Kong Ming, Sr. Matthew also discussed with Gadotzi. However, whether it was the pseudo-servant Zhuge Kong Ming or the real servant Zhuge Kong Ming, they were the same person, just different in appearance. Mr. Merlin, what kind of person is Zhuge Kong Ming? Matthew turned to look at Merlin. As the court magician of King Gilgamesh, Merlin should know the situation of Zhuge Kong Ming. Unfortunately, I only know that Zhuge Kong Ming is a person wearing a China-style robe. Because I was often asked to run errands by King Gilgamesh, I didn't have much contact with Zhuge Kong Ming. To put it simply, Merlin didn't know who was in Castor's team. So, Matthew nodded, indicating that he understood. Since it's a China-style robe, it's probably the real Zhuge Kongming. Gadotzi judged. Maybe there will be a situation like Matthew. Wuming interjected. Last time, Zhuge Kongming hid Emilo 2's consciousness and used Emilo 2's body, clothes, and habits. However, a pseudo-servant could also let the original personality of the body dominate the body. Although Matthew was not a pseudo-servant, Matthew's identity was a subservient, which had the same effect as a pseudo-servant. When Matthew used the power of Galahad, the clothes on his body would turn into purple armor. Therefore, it was also possible that Emilo too would wear Zhuge Kongming's clothes. Then, Wuming thought of the leopard man. By the way, the leopard man here may be the same, but the situation may be completely opposite. Wuming didn't realize it before, but thinking about it carefully, Wuming did see that face in Ilya's world. Ha! Miss Leopard Man is also a pseudo-servant. Villos Senior means that Miss Leopard Man is a god on the inside, and the appearance is a human on the outside. Although they were shocked, Matthew and Gadotzi recalled the leopard man's doll-like appearance, and they couldn't help but believe Wuming's words. Although Dr. Roman did prove that the leopard man was a divine servant, no matter how he looked at it, it was impossible for there to be a god with such a funny appearance. Sure enough, it was caused by a spirit base similar to a pseudo-servant. But the leopard man's situation is not enough to reach the point of pseudo-servant. The leopard man's bestiality is too serious, and there is almost no humanity. At most, it can only be a slight pseudo-servant. Okay, although I don't want to interrupt you, first of all, you have to know that I don't have the slightest combat power. Ha! How come? Merlin's words made Gadotzi and Matthew show surprised and disappointed expressions. Zhuge Kongming's horror is not his combat power, but his wisdom. As for Merlin. Wuming looked at Merlin, who looked at him with expectation and trust. Even Merlin wouldn't make such a joke at this moment. Merlin probably has his own reasons. Merlin doesn't count as combat power. Although Malfa Merlin had been ridiculed by Malfa Merlin, he was still very happy. Regarding the current situation, Gadotzi and Mashu whispered to each other. I feel that Mr. Merlin is so pitiful. It turns out that Mashu also thinks so. At this moment, the current meeting was almost over, and Wuming also spoke at the last moment. In short, since the military advisor is in the Uruk, no matter how bad the situation is, the Uruk will probably be fine. Wuming said with a kind smile. Looking at Wuming's kind smile, Gadotzi, Matthew, and even Anna felt a chill down their spines. In other words, we can be bolder. When Wuming said this, Gadotzi and the others felt even more chills down their spines. So, Lord Hyunryong, what new plan do you have? Merlin also looked at Wuming with a smile, but at this moment, Merlin's smile was more and more similar to Wuming's in the eyes of Gadotzi and the others. It wasn't unreasonable for these two guys to be best friends. This was the so-called birds of a feather flock together. Let's go and conquer the useless Venus goddess. Ah! Chapter 906. Northwest of Mesopotamia, at the foot of Mount Abif, where the mountain range stretched out continuously. Black and purple ripples suddenly appeared here. Then, like carps jumping out of the water, one figure after another jumped out of the black and purple ripples and stood firmly on the ground. There was a black-haired, red-eyed youth wearing the common male clothing of this era, a white-haired nightmare holding a wooden staff, an orange-haired girl with a single ponytail wearing a special magic dress, and a cute girl wearing a slightly revealing purple armor with one of her eyes covered by a fringe. The newcomers were Wuming, Merlin, and the slightly reluctant Gadotzi and Matthew. The four of them all arrived at the foot of Mount Abif. Is it really okay for us to leave Miss Anna there like this? Matthew, who had his feet on the ground, was the first to speak uneasily and slightly embarrassed. It's okay, Matthew. This is also Anna's idea. Wu-Ming was right. This was indeed Anna's idea. Previously, when Wu-Ming was prepared to bring Gadotsi and the others to cause trouble, to attack the Venus goddess, Anna expressed that she was not interested in it. She would rather stay and help clear out the monsters in the surrounding area. After all, Wu-Ming was not an unreasonable person. Since Anna had volunteered to stay, Wu-Ming did not ask the others and agreed like a dictator. Don't forget that we received King Gilgamesh's order to support the feathered serpent god. Leaving one of us there means that we have indeed played a role and completed the mission. Also, we can inform the feathered serpent god and the leopard man that we have temporarily left. Moreover, Anna was the one who suggested it. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone, Merlin explained. But, if we do this half-heartedly, is it really okay for us to complete King Gilgamesh's mission? Will it ruin King Gilgamesh's plan? Not only was Matthew worried about this, but so was Gadotsi. Matthew is right. Sigh, I don't want to be given another trial by King Gilgamesh when I go back. Gadotsi said as her face turned pale, as if she was recalling the life and death trial. Facts had proven that even if one's perception of a person changed, the fear of that person would not disappear in a short time. Don't worry. If anything happens, I'll take care of it. Wu-Ming walked to the 2 of them and patted their heads. His tone was rather confident. Anyway, Gilgamesh had asked the pterosaur to send over the clay tablet that Gadotsi and the others had to listen to his commands after meeting him. Wasn't it Wu-Ming's order to capture the Venus goddess? Gadotsi and the others were indeed listening to Wu-Ming's order, so Gilgamesh wouldn't blame Gadotsi and the others. Everything would be taken care of by Wu-Ming. Senior Villo, I think we should be more cautious. After all, there are still 6 commanders among the demonic beasts. I'm a little worried about Anna alone, worried that Anna will be in danger alone. Wu-Ming guessed and continued Matthew's words. Matthew nodded. After all, the demonic beast commander is an existence that requires multiple servants to defeat, and it's a way to perish together. Gadotsi also said. It was normal for Gadotsi and Matthew to be worried. The data was clearly there. Seeing this, Merlin had to stand up and boost their morale. Don't worry, Matthew, Tachika, the reason why there is a data of multiple servants perishing together to kill the demonic beast commander is entirely because of the situation. This was because of Wu-Ming's attention. After all, Wu-Ming wasn't very clear about the specific content of it. What do you mean by this? At that moment, they didn't move toward the Abiv mountain, but they found a place to sit and sat down. One of the demonic beast commanders, Muhusho, appeared from the Uruk underground and attacked the Uruk. He didn't cause much damage to the Uruk, and he was completely killed by his own pride. After all, Gilgamesh was in charge of the Uruk, and there were many servants. A single demonic beast commander couldn't set off a storm in the Uruk at that time. At the same time when Merlin paused, Matthew, who was like a student listening to a lecture, raised his hand. But, Mr. Merlin, you said that at that time, a servant was sacrificed to kill the demonic beast commander, and nearly 1/3 of the population in the Uruk city was killed. However, Merlin shook his head. The so-called sacrificed servant was Okita Soki, who was a saber. Okita Soki was seriously injured after the war, but he didn't die. He would recover completely after a few days of rest. However, Okita Soki's skill, Frail, was activated at that time. At this point, Merlin paused and did not continue. However, even if Merlin had said this, everyone more or less understood. Don't tell me. Matthew looked inconceivable. Don't tell me. Gadotsi's whole face was filled with an inconceivable expression. It can't be, right? Wu-Ming remembered that when Okita Soki was first summoned, he did spit out blood. And from the name of the skill, Frail, it could be said that the effect of the skill was obvious. Yes, because of the activation of Frail, although the injury was serious but not fatal, it directly became a fatal injury. The most fatal injury to a servant was the broken spirit core, and that was the end of the servant's life. This Roman, who was in the Chaldea control room, was stunned. He even stopped recording what happened in the singularity. It was completely unimaginable that there would be a servant who was forced to leave because of a skill. As a genius, this is the first time I've heard of such a situation. However, if it's the Okita Soki who was tortured by illness, it's indeed possible. Da Vinci calmly analyzed the situation. The skill, the frail, can turn a serious injury into a fatal injury. It seems that the level of the skill is not low. It should be above B class, maybe it has reached A class. Moreover, perhaps Saber's luck value was not high. Listening to Leonardo da Vinci's voice through Godotzi's wrist, Wuming silently complained in his heart. Only a low luck value could explain this. Otherwise, how could Miss Okita encounter such an incredible thing? Chapter 907. Pfft. Cough cough. In short, all of these are coincidences within coincidences, the result of coincidences within coincidences. Merlin, who could not hold back his laughter, immediately covered up for himself. Godotzi and the others did not pay attention to Merlin's fleeting laughter. They were still puzzled by the fact that a servant would die under their own skills. Although according to what Merlin said, it is indeed similar to mutual destruction, but you actually deliberately exaggerated it. This once again confirmed Merlin's previous words. The next topic will be more cruel, so be prepared in advance. In short, it was still Merlin's bad taste. Wuming shook his head and stopped thinking about these things. The reason why a servant and Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao mutual destruction was figured out, then, the next thing was, so, why did 8 of the 10 servants who carried out the decapitation operation, and only 2 of them came back? That was the main point. The decapitation operation carried out by the 10 servants could be said to be very successful, and it was not as bad as you think. For the result of the decapitation operation, Merlin thought that it was already very good. Although because of the plan of King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kongming, the demonic beast commanders were temporarily separated, but even if there is only one demonic beast commander, there are demonic beasts everywhere around it. And to complete the decapitation operation meant that they must go deep into the demonic beast group, and because of King Gilgamesh's magical burden, the servants he summoned were not first-class servants, and it was impossible for them to besiege one demonic beast commander with 10 servants. Not to mention that the efficiency was not high, and it was bound to alert the other demonic beast commanders. In case the other demonic beast commanders noticed the problem and gathered together, then they really couldn't do anything. It is basically impossible to get close to the demonic beast commander when the 10 servants are separated. It is basically impossible to kill the commander and retreat while surrounded by so many demonic beasts. Even if it was second-rate or third-rate servants, if 2 or 3 servants fought together, it was still possible to kill a demonic beast commander. The fact also proved that this idea was indeed feasible, 8 servants in exchange for the death of 3 demonic beast commanders. And to put it bluntly, demonic beast commanders seemed to be unable to be mass-produced, and King Gilgamesh could summon servants again as long as he could hold on, although he probably won't do that again. In the end, there were 2 servants that returned to Uruk alive. For a one-way decapitation mission, it was a pleasant surprise that a servant could come back alive. After sacrificing the lives of 3 demon commanders, 2 followers came back alive. Based on this operation decapitation alone, it's already an excellent result. Merlin was very optimistic about this. How could this be? Matthew was shocked. Isn't this a suicide squad? Godotzi vividly interpreted the essence of the beheading operation. Indeed, King Gilgamesh didn't expect the 10 servants to come back alive. King Gilgamesh assigned this task with the consent of the servants, and they were also very willing to serve as a suicide squad in order to give hope and a future for mankind. Merlin said the truth indifferently. This is too cruel. Matthew's eyes were full of sadness again. Although it was cruel, Matthew really couldn't refute it. Was this the so-called necessary sacrifice? Humans couldn't deal with demonic beast commanders, only servants could, and combined with the situation at that time, they could only send servants to the depths of the demonic beasts to carry out the decapitation operation. However, even so, in the face of another sacrifice, Matthew still couldn't look at this problem calmly. Matthew, in a war, anyone's sacrifice is just a number. This is the essence of war. In the past, he, Artoria, and many knights of the Round Table, led countless knights to fight in the north and south, and it could be said that he had already seen through the essence of war. But, in this war between the demonic beasts and the humans, even if the servants sacrificed themselves, as long as their sacrifice created the conditions for the humans to win in the future, then their sacrifice was not in vain. Just like the servants who sacrificed themselves for you in the previous 6 singularities, we should remember them and work harder for the next operation. We can't let their sacrifice go to waste. Merlin is right, the original 11 demonic beast commanders have now been reduced to 6, but there are still 10 servants on the human side. The scale of victory is gradually tilting to our side. At this time, we should work harder. How can we be depressed because of the servant sacrifice? Yes, Villo-senpai, I'm still recovering, sorry. Matthew patted his cheek and recovered again. Because of his incomparable emotional state, Matthew's mood recovered quickly after the training of 6 singularities. However, at this time, Gadotsi noticed some problems. Wait a minute, why are there still 6 demonic beast commanders left? Didn't we defeat 4 in total? It stands to reason that there should be 7 demonic beast commanders left, right? This was something that Matthew didn't notice. Gadotsi counted his fingers and thought to himself, could it be that he had miscalculated? This is my negligence. When I came here before, I encountered a demonic beast commander and killed it, so there are 6 demonic beast commanders left. Indeed, only Wuming and Merlin knew about the death of the prototype Eulidim. After that, the 2 of them didn't talk about it, so it was normal that Gadotsi didn't know about it. Wait a minute, was the previous light beam caused by Villo? Roman's incomparably shocked voice came from Gadotsi's bracelet, and Wuming could imagine Roman's expression at the moment. That guy was different from the other demonic beasts, so I paid a little attention to it, but I overdid it. Wuming smiled a little embarrassedly. Gadotsi, Matthew, Roman, and Leonardo da Vinci fell into a state of shock. Ha ha ha, Lord Hyunryong overdid it a little, but it's very scary. Only Merlin smiled at the side. Forget it, the Knights of the Round Table can be Uruk Hyunryong, so it's not surprising that you can kill a demonic beast commander alone. It's not alone. That Eulidim has quite a few mass-produced Eulidim by its side. Although Wuming really didn't care about them, they were indeed destroyed by the aftermath of Wuming's attack. Sure enough, Senior Villo is really strong. I think so too, Matthew. The conversation between the 2 had other meanings, and Wuming was still a little unaware. Chapter 908. Gadotsi and Matthew whispered to each other about Wuming's unconsciousness. Regarding the Uruk Hyunryong's lack of awareness of his own power, I've recorded this as well as the previous incident where his servant was killed by his own skill. Although Roman was stunned when they were talking about Okita Soki, he still recorded everything that should be recorded. Not to mention that this news was a miracle to the magic world, all the actions in the singularity had to be recorded in the database. I'm just telling the truth. However, the fact that I was able to eliminate a major monster commander so easily is probably because the other party underestimated me. Being able to withstand Wuming's multiple spells was indeed a testament to the strength of the major monster commander. Although Ulidim was dying after receiving Wuming's attack, it was not to be assumed that the major monster commander was not as powerful as imagined. First of all, Ulidim was tricked by Wuming. He did not even know that Wuming had activated his multiple spells. If Ulidim had been prepared, the outcome would have been uncertain. Second, the multiple spells that Wuming used on Ulidim could only be used in the wilderness. If it were in a city or a place with a lot of people, Wuming would definitely not dare to use this trick. Although the impact of multiple spells was not as great as the nuclear bombs in human society in the later period, it could still cause a certain amount of damage. The originally peaceful plateau had now been turned into a plateau basin by Wuming's attack. The range of this spell was too large. Not to mention the impact of earthquakes. If it was released in a city, it would be almost impossible for any human to survive. In short, this trick could not be used so easily in the future. Even if it did not affect humans, if there were earthquakes or something like that every day, humans would be scared half to death. How would they be able to fight major monsters then? For war, individual bravery was not the key. The easiest way was to rely on the soldiers at the bottom. Only when they had enough momentum and vigor could they fight a tough battle. However, once Wuming had too many concerns, the difficulty of dealing with major monster commanders would definitely increase. Especially after listening to some of the details of the major monster commanders provided by Merlin, Wuming had a deeper understanding of them. If it was a one-on-one battle, Wuming would not be afraid of any of the major monster commanders at the moment. However, if it was Wuming alone, it would be a little difficult for him to fight all the major monster commanders. Besides, he did not know the specific situation of Gorgon, who had been staying in the house all this time. Wuming's plan might fail. However, he couldn't put too much pressure on the magical beast. He had to learn to grasp the principle that going too far was as bad as falling short. He could not underestimate the enemy, nor could he pay too much attention to the enemy. This way, he could pay attention to the enemy without too much pressure and achieve the best results. One thing is clear now. Merlin, you deliberately exaggerated the current situation. It's obviously not to that extent yet. There should be a limit to your jokes. Gadotzi and Matthew, who agreed with Wuming's words, nodded, and then looked at Merlin with indifferent eyes. I'm just trying to make everyone feel more threatened. Why are you treating me like a bad guy? Alas, it's hard to be a good person. Gadotzi and Matthew were a little moved by Merlin's words. Moreover, if Wuming did not know Merlin well, Wuming might have been deceived too. In short, although the major monsters are very powerful, our forces are not weak either. You don't need to worry about Anna. After all, that is the territory of the Quetzalcoatl. Thinking of the Quetzalcoatl who once showed him great respect, Wuming had to admit that as a god, that guy was completely qualified. Don't underestimate the Quetzalcoatl. With the Quetzalcoatl, unless Tiamat appears in person, the southern jungle will be a very safe place. Yes. We understand. Gadotzi and Matthew stood up and saluted Wuming, like primary school students who listened to their teacher. Then, let's go and head to the Temple of Abiff Mountain. Then, the four of them set off to climb Abiff Mountain. As they walked all the way up the mountain road, Matthew took the lead and asked, by the way, is the goddess of Venus in the temple on this mountain? Although Wuming did not make it clear who it was, just the word goddess of Venus basically exposed who they would meet next. Speaking of the goddess of Venus in Mesopotamia, I'm afraid only Ishtar is the goddess of Venus. Is she the mistress of the heavens? In Chaldea's control room, Roman sat in front of his seat, his hands constantly tapping on the keyboard. The screen in front of Roman also showed images that ordinary people could not understand. But, Chaldea's instruments have detected that there are only 4 gods in Mesopotamia. What's going on? 4. Gu-Dazi stopped. He didn't understand what was going on. The doctor is referring to the 4 gods, the goddess of Warcraft, the Quetzalcoatl, the goddess of the underworld, and Senior Villo. The first three were the goddesses of the Three Goddesses Alliance. Although Wu Ming did not say much, his spiritual base also belonged to the Yura Qianriyang. But Assassin said that there is a goddess on this mountain. So, shouldn't there be 5 gods? Gadotsi subconsciously looked at the top of the mountain, where she could vaguely see the shadow of the temple. I'm also wondering about this. On the big screen in front of Roman, 5 dialogue boxes appeared. The goddess of Warcraft, the Quetzalcoatl, the goddess of the underworld, and the Yura Qianriyang each occupied a box, but the last box was a series of question marks. Is it possible that the divinity is not strong enough, so it can't be detected? Matthew asked. The leopard man they encountered before was also a god, but if they didn't encounter him, Chaldea's instruments couldn't detect his existence at all. Only gods with strong divinity like the goddess of Warcraft and the Quetzalcoatl could be detected by Chaldea's instruments without contact. That's impossible. Ishtar is the mistress of the sky. Even if she is a pseudo-servant at the moment, her divinity can't be that weak. Wu Ming saw Ishtar the last time he came here. Although she came as a pseudo-servant in the form of a girl, her divinity didn't decrease much. She was still a very powerful divine servant. Oh. Another pseudo-servant. Gadotsi nodded. She always felt that she always encountered pseudo-servants. Although Ishtar is a pseudo-servant, she is much more powerful than the leopard man, Wu Ming added. At that moment, the almighty Leonardo da Vinci spoke. Is it related to the goddess of the underworld? Chapter 909. What does this have to do with the goddess of the underworld? Gadotsi expressed that she really didn't know anything about the myths of the Mesopotamia region. The goddess of the underworld that Leonardo da Vinci refers to is an existence named Ereshkigal. She is known as the mistress of the underworld. In a sense, she is the half-body of the mistress of the heavens, Ishtar. Wu Ming explained to Gadotsi. He was also a Yura Qianriyang. As a local, at least he knew more than Roman and the others. Since there is a legend of half-body, it naturally means that the two are different sides of the same pillar god. In this case, the goddess of the underworld and the loser goddess on this mountain should be considered the same pillar god. If they share the same divinity, it's normal that they can't be detected. If the goddess of the underworld is Ereshkigal, then this situation is true. Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's seat, was constantly tapping on the keyboard, modifying the data of the singularity of Mesopotamia registered in Chaldea's database. It's very likely that, as Qianriyang said, Chaldea only detected the existence of 4 gods. Roman made the final confirmation. Although I don't have a good impression of that girl, even if she is a loser, she is still a goddess. If she joins us and signs a temporary contract with Tachika, it will be a big boost to our combat power. Wu Ming had this idea, which was why he dragged Gadotsi and Matthew to Mount Abiff. And in this way, even Gil won't say anything about you leaving the southern jungle without permission. After all, compared to getting the loser goddess to join us, it's unwise to let the loser goddess be a lone follower. After all, it was more reassuring to have an unstable element in one's hands than to let it go. How dare you say that? You bastard! The voice of a young girl filled with resentment entered the ears of everyone who had climbed halfway up the mountain. Master, it's a servant's reaction, please stand behind me. Matthew instantly opened his hand and conjured a shield. He stood in front of Gadotsi, protecting her behind him. In the face of unknown servants, the first thing to do was to protect their master. What's this reaction? Is it a god? Roman, who was in Chaldea, was shocked when he saw the results of the instrument. Ishtar, he said. Wu Ming looked up at the charming person sitting on the bow-like heavenly ship Anna in the sky. I didn't expect you to have the guts to look for me here, Qianriyang. Ishtar's resentment towards Wu Ming seemed to be particularly big, and Ishtar didn't seem to pay attention to anyone else. She only paid attention to Wuming. "Vilo-senpai, what's going on?" Matthew couldn't help but ask. From Ishtar's reaction, it was obvious that Wuming had provoked him, and it was not a light one. "Don't ask me, even if you ask me, I don't have the impression of provoking this troublesome guy." "Hey! Don't ignore me whispering there." Along with Ishtar's furious voice, a piercing sound came into everyone's ears. Whoosh! A golden flash of light shot straight towards Wuming. "Vilo-senpai! Assassin!" Matthew and Gadotsi couldn't help but shout. Clank! And Zurgen's staff appeared from the side, and Wuming held it directly in his hand, and the golden flash hit it directly. This is... The twisted golden staff attracted everyone's attention, and the 7 snake heads inlaid with different colored gems were full of noble and strange colors. Even Ishtar froze in mid-air with her hands in a shooting position. "Ah! I know." Roman, who thought he had completely figured it out, was the first to speak and break the silence. As we all know, the fight for power is extremely common in myths. Even the virtuous Uruk Hyunryong also has a desire for power. According to the Gilgamesh epic records, the Uruk Hyunryong once seized Ishtar's position as the Uruk city god and drove Ishtar out of the Uruk. There are also many small stories that have been investigated by many scholars and experts. Although various experts and professors have different opinions, there are many parts that are worth referencing. For example, Uruk Hyunryong seized other things from Ishtar. When Roman said this, Wuming more or less understood what he was trying to say. The staff in Hyunryong's hand is obviously consistent with the 7-headed warhammer staff that belonged to Ishtar in the myths. So, it's probably because the Uruk Hyunryong seized a lot of things from Ishtar that caused Ishtar to hate the Uruk Hyunryong. Roman explained with confidence. Gadotsi and Matthew nodded as if they had suddenly seen the light. Only Merlin watched the scene unfold with a smile and did not say anything. If Wuming didn't know whether he had done it or not, he might have believed it too. When he thought about it carefully, Roman's analysis was indeed quite reasonable. In this way, it was understandable that Ishtar was full of resentment and anger towards Wuming. "What the hell is this?" Wuming sighed helplessly. Reasonable. 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 Facts were facts. This was something that couldn't be said carelessly. Wuming didn't steal anything from Ishtar at all. Well, the idea of stealing the Uruk city guardian was also nonsense. However, Wuming could more or less understand why all of this turned out like this. Wuming, who didn't like Ishtar, did drive Ishtar away in the past, but that was only because Ishtar had done something that he couldn't do, so Wuming did that. And Ishtar would come back soon because she couldn't do without the tributes from the citizens, such as gems, 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 and so on. Perhaps it was because he had driven her away too many times, coupled with the fact that the records of later generations weren't perfect. The story was gradually changed into that Uruk Hyunryong stole the position of the Uruk city guardian from Ishtar. Wuming also understood. After all, the various myths in modern times were the result of people's exaggerations in history. As for the so-called 7-headed warhammer staff, it was purely because it was similar. It wasn't Ishtar's staff at all. But did Ishtar really think so? Yes, that's right. "I'm talking to you, Hyunryong. Give me back my 7-headed warhammer staff." At this moment, Ishtar didn't care whether what Roman said was true or not. She was going to make the best of it. She had her eyes on the gorgeous staff. Chapter 9-10. At that moment, Gadotsi and Matthew didn't know what to say. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in the Chaldea control room, naturally didn't speak again. It was obvious that the matter was both complicated and simple. But all in all, Wuming seemed to be in the right. Even Gadotsi and Matthew could see that Ishtar was obviously panicking. Ishtar was obviously the kind of person who couldn't refute after her lie was exposed in front of her elders. Only Merlin, who knew what was going on, half squatted on the ground with his back facing everyone. He seemed to be laughing so hard that he was twitching. "You stupid goddess, are you blinded by money? You don't even know how to lie." Ishtar was even more embarrassed by Wu Ming's words. After all, this was indeed the truth. Ishtar could speak casually in front of others, but in front of Wu Ming, it was a little difficult. "Although I also know that you want to take advantage of Roman's words and take my Ains Ur Gong staff for yourself, I still have to say that your IQ matches the number of gems you have." Finally, Wu Ming shouted a sentence. "You shameless loser and stupid goddess. Reflect on yourself." The roar like a dragon resounded through the sky, and Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but cover their ears. The magic contained in Wu Ming's voice even interfered with the communication between Chaldea and Gadotsi. In short, although Wu Ming's voice couldn't spread to the Uruk, it was not a problem for it to spread to the entire Abif Mountain. However, no matter who was right or wrong in this matter, Wu Ming's voice was a disaster not much worse than social death for Ishtar. Damn Hyunryong. As if she had lost her mind, Ishtar hugged her head with both hands, and her eyes lost their focus. She sat on horse Anna and swayed as if she was about to fall off. Seeing this scene, the innocent little angel Mashu quickly reminded Ishtar. After all, Ishtar really looked like a daughter who couldn't do anything if no one took care of her. "Miss Ishtar, please be careful. It's dangerous." Matthew's words made Ishtar stunned, but then, she also recovered from the torture given by Wu Ming. "Don't worry, I won't fall off horse Anna." Ishtar flipped her hair as she spoke. Her whole person was full of charm, which was very much in line with her image as the mistress of the heavens, if the terrible scene from before was ignored. Speaking of which, where were we just now? With one hand on her chin, Ishtar was quite distressed as she recalled the conversation between her and Wu Ming. This made Wu Ming blush with shame. He always felt that this goddess who descended by relying on the body of a human girl had become quite unreliable. "Don't even think about my staff of Anzavulgan, loser goddess. Also, quickly go back to Uruk and be a city god. The demonic beasts have caused serious damage to this land, and the Uruk needs your strength." 3 times. Ishtar's face darkened. "You actually called me loser goddess 3 times. You're dead." Ishtar roared and aimed the simulated scope in Wu Ming's direction. Horse Anna began to gather magic. "Master, be careful." Matthew approached Gadotsi and raised his shield again. "Senior Villo, please be careful." However, Wu Ming did not pay attention to Matthew's words. His attention was on something else. Wu Ming had said "loser goddess" more than 3 times, but Ishtar had only heard it 3 times. In other words, Ishtar had just arrived. So it was at that time. Wu Ming whispered to himself. "I heard it all before. You completely disliked my wanton behavior and wanted to detain me. I won't listen to you and sign a temporary contract with the human master over there." Wu Ming's heart sank. Sure enough, Ishtar had heard what he said at that time. "Can you be considered the mistress of the heavens like this? Ishtar. When your father and the others disappeared, you only know how to run away. I prefer the stubborn and mischievous goddess of the past who can be straightforward and stupid, and not the current loser goddess. You're a disgrace to the title of Mistress of the Heavens. I think you might as well stay in the border area of the Mesopotamia until we save this world. Loser goddess." Gadotsi and Matthew both looked at Wu Ming in shock. They were shocked that Wu Ming could say such harsh and mocking words. Even Merlin, who had been released from his stomach ache from laughing state, became slightly more serious. At the same time, the atmosphere at the scene became very oppressive. It was like a precursor to a volcanic eruption. However, since it was called a precursor, it meant that there was no danger at the moment. Tianzhou Horse Anna's magic cannon muzzle also stopped condensing magic. What did you say? Ishtar was provoked by Wu Ming's words. At this moment, her face was even gloomier than before. The magic emitted from her body made Gadotzi and Matthew tremble. Senior Villo. Why don't you stop talking for now? Matthew and Gadotzi tried to persuade Wu Ming. After all, it was not a wise thing to unilaterally anger the other party, was it not? However, this was the effect Wu Ming wanted. As the mistress of the heavens, Ishtar also had a very strong self-esteem, except when it came to gems. Through this aspect, he could well control the angry Ishtar. Of course, there was also a chance that it would make the other party even more furious. Next, it was time to see how Wu Ming would turn the situation around. I'm telling the truth. If you were Father God and the others, you would definitely take the initiative to clean up the magic beasts raging on the earth and protect the humans who believe in the gods. And you, if I'm not wrong, in addition to driving Tianzhou Horse Anna around, you would definitely only go to a sparsely populated place like the ranch to kill a few magic beasts and then sweep away the ranch owner's money, Ishtar. Wu Ming's words made Ishtar's face turn red instead of exploding. The magic stagnant at Ma Anna's muzzle also dissipated. What are you talking about? How could I do that? I'm just taking the offerings from the ranch owner. In other words, you did do that. This time, it was Wu Ming's turn to be gloomy. How thick-skinned must she be to do such a thing? Squeak. Seeing Wu Ming like this, Ishtar seemed to be frightened and let out a strange cry. Gadotzi, Matthew, and Roman and Leonardo da Vinci who were in Chaldea's control room looked like they had seen a ghost. At this moment, they felt like Wu Ming was the perfect counter to Ishtar. You just wait. I'm not done with you. Ishtar said fiercely as she rode Tianzhou Horse Anna to the top of the mountain. However, not knowing if it was an illusion, Gadotzi and the others felt that Ishtar was crying when she said this. Was the mistress of the heavens being bullied by the Uruk Yenryong and crying? That's impossible, probably. Chapter 9-11. While everyone else was entangled by these messy matters, only Merlin was paying attention to Wu Ming with a clear mind. He felt that Wu Ming's expression at the moment was a bit similar to how he felt when he faced Artoria. Although the target was different, Wu Ming did give Merlin such a feeling at the moment. A worried old father. That's right, Wu Ming at the moment seemed to be worried about his disobedient daughter. Wu Ming was indeed worried. Everyone in Mesopotamia knew that Ishtar was spoiled by the gods. Although she was a good god, she always did evil things. Back then, the reason why Wu Ming came to the Uruk was mainly because Wu Ming was tricked by Morgan Le Fay. By chance, he forcibly unlocked the bloodline of the Origin of Dragon, allowing Wu Ming to use the body of the Origin of Dragon, when he was still a minor. However, at that time, Wu Ming was too accustomed to the body of the Origin of Dragon, and the awakening of the bloodline was not perfect. He could not control the body almost perfectly like Wu Ming now. In any case, Wu Ming awakened the Origin of Dragon by accident. In addition, Wu Ming was indeed injured at that time. Otherwise, Wu Ming would not have hidden to recuperate and used the statue that people made for him as his eyes to observe the Uruk. After that, Wu Ming used this eye to observe Ishtar's series of evil deeds. Wu Ming did not hate Ishtar, or rather, Wu Ming did not hate anyone, provided that no one provoked him. As long as no one provoked him, everything was fine. Wu Ming's attitude towards Ishtar was the same. As long as Ishtar did not provoke him, he would not pay attention to Ishtar. However, things did not go as planned. Ishtar would do some troublesome things from time to time. Not only did she easily provoke Wu Ming, but the Uruk citizens also always prayed to Wuming. The content of the prayers was not excessive like getting rid of Ishtar, but they were basically complaints about Ishtar and begging Ishtar to stop her evil deeds. Wuming was respected and worshipped by the citizens of the Uruk and even Mesopotamia. When Ishtar really crossed the line and provoked him, Wuming would teach her a lesson. For example, he would beat Ishtar up and chase her out of the Uruk. At that time, Wuming was completely unfamiliar with his dragon body. He did not have a certain degree of understanding and development. Naturally, he was not that strong, but he was not so weak that he could not even defeat Ishtar. Logically speaking, Wuming's dragon body would only be completely restored after reaching adulthood. By chance, Wuming's dragon body was unlocked in advance, and it could be regarded as a considerable increase in strength. However, even if Wuming defeated Ishtar, the Sumer gods were still around at that time. Even if it was a lesson, Wuming could not go too far. Even if the Sumer gods were afraid of Wuming's identity, if he did not give them face and taught Ishtar a lesson, who knew what the Sumer gods would do in the end? Even a cornered dog would jump over a wall, let alone a group of gods. Therefore, Wuming, who was not invincible, had to learn to be moderate. Besides, it did not mean that he had to use force to teach. Most of the time, wisdom was better than force. Especially when facing Ishtar, the spoiled mistress of the heavens, Wuming found that it was particularly easy for him to use his brain to deal with her. However, it was as if she had forgotten the pain after the scar healed. After a few days, she would naturally return as if nothing had happened. Godin, who was also Ishtar's father, once came to look for Wuming, and the two had a short conversation about Ishtar. It was nothing more than taking care of Ishtar, saying that she was still young and immature, and so on. Godin was like a parent meeting the class teacher. However, every time Wuming talked about Ishtar's mistakes, the other party would always smile and change the topic, constantly asking Wuming to help take care of Ishtar. This made Wuming very helpless. After all, even if you asked Wuming to take care of Ishtar, he could not do so. After all, Ishtar did not have the slightest respect for Wuming. To put it simply, Ishtar would not listen to Wuming at all. It was like a naughty student being reprimanded by the class teacher. On the surface, they would say that they would change, but afterward, they would forget everything they promised. Ishtar was obviously such a student, and whether it was in the open or in the dark, she did not show the slightest willingness to be obedient. She still did things her own way, and in the end, she became even worse. The Bowl of Heaven incident was the embodiment of Ishtar's worsening behavior. However, it was not only bad. Ever since the Bowl of Heaven incident, Ishtar had a trace of fear for Wuming. Although Ishtar herself was not aware of it, Wuming obviously noticed it. Wuming also had a big prejudice against Ishtar because she indirectly released the Bowl of Heaven. Therefore, after that incident, Wuming became stricter with Ishtar. Ishtar, who had a trace of fear, was also frightened by Wuming's strictness. Gradually, she did not return to Uruk. This was probably the origin of the legend that Uruk Hyunryong was the Uruk city god who stole Ishtar. Not long after that, the gods gradually separated from humans, and gradually left the human world. Wuming also left Uruk with Enkidu, who was opportunistically avoided death by himself. However, after the Bowl of Heaven incident, the nature of the relationship between Wuming and Ishtar did indeed change. Especially now that Ishtar appeared as a pseudo-servant, the special relationship between the two became even more obvious. If one had to describe it, it was like the relationship between a melancholy homeroom teacher and a naughty student had changed to an old father and a spoiled daughter. Because there was still kindness in Ishtar's bones, and Wuming's previous actions were also good intentions. After the gods disappeared, Ishtar, who appeared as a pseudo-servant in this world, had a feeling of dependence on Hyunryong, who used to be very strict with her. It was like a naughty student whose father was in trouble would subconsciously ask for help from their neighbor who used to take care of them and teach them a lesson. However, neither of them noticed this, otherwise, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Merlin, as a bystander, saw through everything. This was probably the so-called the onlooker sees the game more clearly. Villo-senpai, what should we do next? Anyway, Matthew thought that her brain couldn't think anymore. This series of events made Matthew at a loss, and she didn't know what to do next. Continue to climb the mountain. Wuming pointed at the faintly visible palace on the mountain, and then immediately moved. Since we're already here, if we don't bring Ishtar back, I'll feel bad no matter how I think about it. However, as soon as Wuming finished his sentence, the entire Abif mountain shook violently. Chapter 9:12. What's going on? Gadotsi, who lost her balance and almost fell, could not help but look at Wuming. Oh, it seems to be an Abifu spirit. Merlin looked thoughtfully in a certain direction on the mountain and said in surprise. Abifu spirit. Gadotsi and Matthew were full of doubts about the so-called Abifu spirit. What is that? A monster? A ghost? However, at the next moment, as if responding to Gadotsi and Matthew's doubts, a super-huge magical pig rushed down from the mountain. From the looks of it, it seemed like it wanted to destroy Gadotsi and the others in one blow. That's an Abifu spirit. Gadotsi was shocked. It was clearly a large magical beast. After Mount Abifu was killed by the former Ishtar, a magical beast was naturally formed in the mountain. The magical beast represents the anger of Mount Abifu, so it's called the Abifu spirit. However, everyone had no time to listen to Wuming's explanation. At this moment, whether it was the current speed of the magical pig or the position of everyone, it clearly pointed out the situation they were in at the moment. It's a big crisis. Although his words were full of panic, Matthew immediately put up his shield in front of everyone. Master. Matthew glanced at Gadotsi, and Gadotsi nodded knowingly. At this time, it was obviously unrealistic to escape, so Matthew was ready to activate his noble phantasm to resist the impact of the magical pig. Gadotsi was also ready to support him with her command spell just in case. At this time, Wuming suddenly walked to Matthew, who had already put up his shield, put his hand on Matthew's shoulder, and said, "Let me do it. Senior Villo." Matthew could not make up his mind for a while and turned to look at his senior. Gadotsi nodded. Since Wuming said so, she believed in him. "Senior Villo, please be careful." Matthew did not withdraw his shield. After talking to Wuming, he returned to Gadotsi's side. Even with the protection of Senior Villo, he can't relax. He still has to protect his senior. Assassin, how are you going to deal with it? Gadotsi looked at the magical pig that was getting closer and closer, and looked at Wuming with a little panic. Tachika, do you know that I'm partly responsible for the reason why Mount Abifu was killed by Ishtar? As if reflecting this sentence, when a bifling saw Wuming standing at the front, it became even angrier, and even sped up a little. You're also partly responsible? Gadotsi was stunned. You can say that I didn't save him. Without further explanation, Wuming looked at a bifling, who was getting angrier, and stretched out his hand. Wuming has long known that Mount Abifu will be killed by Ishtar through his understanding of the mysterious world. Therefore, Wuming did not intervene too much in this matter. When he came to the land of Mesopotamia, he had several conversations with the mountain spirit of Mount Abifu. When he brought Gil to Mount Abifu also gave Wuming a lot of convenience. It was precisely because of his good impression that Wuming helped Mount Abifu and sent Ishtar away to avoid Mount Abifu's death. However, when the Ishtar in the parallel world learned about Gilgamesh's gender, her anger affected Mount Abifu, and Wuming's inaction was also a factor. Although that happened in the parallel world, it will be similar in this world. What happened in the parallel world where Wuming is in, other parallel worlds will definitely be affected to a certain extent. Wuming knows in his heart that the suppression force of the M-shaped moon world will definitely do this. Therefore, when facing the angry Abifu in this parallel world, Wuming had a strange feeling. He and the mountain spirit of Mount Abifu are not very close friends, but they are still friends. Wuming still has a trace of regret for his inaction in the beginning. This is also one of the few regrets of Wuming in the continuous travel that continues to this day. The appearance of the Abifu spirit is probably related to my voice just now. Since I'm the one who lured it out, then I'll clean it up. Wuming doesn't know whether the killing of Ishtar in this parallel world by the Abifu mountain has direct or indirect relationship with him, but Wuming can be sure of one thing. At this moment, the Abifu spirit in front of Wuming has become an existence like a violent spirit, and the only thing Wuming can do is to give it relief. Thinking of this, Wuming condensed a large amount of magic power in his hand. The powerful magic power caused the air to flow rapidly, thus creating wind. Moreover, the extremely dense magic power source in Wuming's hand also produced some gravitational force, slowly attracting the surrounding stones and soil. Seeing this, Merlin's expression changed. Merlin is not interested in anything else, but the move Wuming is about to use. This magic power. Roman and Chaldea also saw the data results from the detection instrument and made a shocked sound. Could it be? Immediately afterward, the magic power source in Wuming's hand that had reached the limit of density suddenly compressed. In an instant, a high-intensity hurricane spread from Wuming's palm to the surroundings, blowing Merlin's clothes. Gadotzi and Matthew were also unable to open their eyes because of the strong wind pressure. In the next second, a beam of light full of magic power and the size of a huge wild boar that was the incarnation of the Abifu spirit instantly shot towards the Abifu spirit that rushed in front of Wuming. The Abifu spirit was swallowed by the beam of light without any preparation and without any sound. Then, the beam of light burst into the sky with the movement of Wuming's arm. The beam of light disappeared, the wind pressure disappeared, and Gadotzi and Matthew also opened their eyes. The Abifu spirit had already disappeared, leaving only a charred trace that rushed along the ground to the mountain. Walala, extremely fine sand, stones, and soil fell from the sky, which was the debris attracted by the gravity generated by the magic power source. Wait a minute. Was that just a simple magic cannon? Roman's shocked voice came out from Gadotzi's wrist again. Magic cannon? Gadotzi asked in confusion. It's a magic trick where pure magic is processed, transformed, and strengthened to shoot at the enemy in the form of bullets or cannonballs. It's called magic bullet, and magic cannon can be understood as a luxurious upgraded version of magic bullet. Whether its strength or range, it's improved by more than a little. Merlin kindly explained. The upgraded version of magic bullets, Assassin, is really powerful. I've only just learned how to release ordinary magic bullets after a long time of practice. Gadotzi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. You can't compare with him. Magic cannon has high requirements in fine operation and magic power. The former is fine, but almost no human can meet the latter. Chapter 9:13. Magicians were magicians because they were a group of people who studied magic. It was naturally possible to achieve the former, but the latter was really difficult for magicians. For example, the magic power of the magic cannon that Wuming had just released was almost comparable to the magic power of a large spiritual vein. If ordinary magicians wanted to release such a magic cannon, they would not be able to do it without using some extremely special methods. Senior Villow's magic power is indeed quite sufficient. Matthew remembered that when they were at the American Singularity, Wuming created a fake Holy Grail that simply provided magic power for Wuming. Wuming's magic power was not infinite, but he did not lack magic power. There was no other reason. His magic power capacity was really beyond imagination. If Wuming's body was used as the source of the world, Wuming, who had sufficient magic power, would not have the slightest pressure to support the magic operation of a world. Not only was the amount great, but Wu Ming's magic power recovery was also extraordinary. However, at this time, Roman shouted. "Wait a minute. You're focusing on the wrong thing." The shout was as if he had seen something incredible. "My equipment here shows that Hyunryong did not use a magic cannon, but a pure magic blast that looks like a magic cannon." Roman's words focused everyone's attention on Gadotzi's communication bracelet. "Doctor, what do you mean?" "It did not go through the processing, deformation, and strengthening of the general magic bullet process. He directly compressed the magic power to the extreme and simply released it." Gadotzi and Matthew looked at each other, and then at Wu Ming at the same time. The three of them looked at each other without saying a word, but Wu Ming could clearly see that Gadotzi and Matthew's mouths were slowly opening wide. "Hey, hey, hey!" Merlin, who had already expected this, covered his ears in advance to prevent his ears from suffering. "Ahahaha, although I have never seen Villow's magic power before." Merlin smiled rather relaxedly. "But, to be able to burn the ground like this, how much magic power must be compressed and released?" Matthew had some experience in magic, unlike Gadotzi who was a newcomer. Anyway, in Matthew's eyes, it was simply compressed magic power and released it. Without magic modification, it would not be able to create such a scene. Although many servants had the skill of mana release, they could not create such a scene that looked like it was bombarded by a supergiant electromagnetic cannon. Mana release was a skill that allowed the user to release the mana stored in their body for a split second. It was a good choice for both damage and movement speed. Moreover, some servants also had obvious magic attributes. In that case, mana release could achieve different effects. For example, take Karna as an example. As a servant, the attribute of his skill, mana release, was flame. By releasing a large amount of magic power from the soles of his feet in an instant, the flame produced by the magic power could promote Karna to rise, thus achieving the effect of flight. By controlling the magic power intermittently, it could achieve the effect of hovering in the air. That was the advantage of mana release with obvious attributes. Although the ordinary mana release could also achieve this point, the ordinary mana release was indeed not as good as the mana release with the flame attribute. And Wu Ming's magic power did not have any attributes, it was just pure magic power. However, whether it was magic power with or without attributes, it was extremely difficult to create such a scene in front of Gadotzi and others. Mana release, with such a large range, required magic power that not everyone could have. In short, ordinary people and even servants did not have enough magic power. Almost no servant had as much magic power as Wu Ming, and even the energy in the god's body could not catch up with Wu Ming. And what was the advantage of having more magic power? It was the unlimited use of magic power, from quantitative change to qualitative change. Only a quantitative change can lead to qualitative change, which was understood by everyone, but not everyone could do it. After all, no one could squander their magic power like Wu Ming. The magic power compressed by Wu Ming even produced a trace of gravity, which was enough to imagine how huge the base of the magic power compressed by Wu Ming was. It can be said that if Villo didn't artificially raise the magic power after the compression, I'm afraid half of Ibiff Mountain would have been impacted and exploded. Roman made the final statement. "I'm going to drink some coffee to relieve my shocked heart. See you later." However, Wu Ming did not think that drinking coffee would have an effect on relieving heart fatigue. After that, Roman closed the communication channel. Matthew saw that Roman's voice no longer came out of the communication bracelet, so he raised his head and looked at Wu Ming. Matthew swallowed his saliva to show that he still hadn't recovered from the shock just now. Gadotzi was not affected much. "By the way, assassin, what will happen if you blow yourself up?" Gadotzi suddenly asked a question, which also attracted Matthew's attention. "The explosion will probably affect the range between here and the Uruk. Ibith Mountain was still some distance away from the Uruk, which was indeed terrifying. At this moment, Wu Ming's bad taste broke out. Why, do you want me to try? Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi with a smile on his face. If it's your request, Tachika, it's not that I can't do it. I'll be happy to try it for you. Let's not. Let's go up the mountain. Goddess Ishtar is probably tired of waiting for us. Gadotsi immediately waved her hand, but the trace of sweat on her forehead still showed a trace of panic in the girl's heart. You're right. We pretended to think for a moment, then turned around and continued climbing the mountain. When we passed by the scorch marks on the mountain, Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but take a few more glances. If they were hit by this cannon, it would indeed be terrifying. The two thought of the angry Ibith spirit. It was really pitiful, then the two rejoiced. Fortunately, when they fired the magic cannon just now, they didn't aim it at the mountain, otherwise, I'm sorry, Tachika, Matthew, the mountain path opposite us is broken in half and we can't use it, Wu Ming, who was walking in front, suddenly said. Maybe it was affected by the magic cannon. Anyway, we can't use it for a while. Okay, let's pretend that they didn't say anything. Wu Ming looked at Gadotsi and Matthew, then looked at Merlin, and made a decision in his heart that made Merlin feel a little uneasy. A moment later, Wu Ming carried Gadotsi and Matthew to the top of the mountain. Is this Goddess Ishtar's palace? The first thing that came into Matthew's sight was a building that was different from the surrounding barren land, and it flashed with a hint of gold. But, it's just a little. Gadotsi smiled awkwardly. What was Gadotsi laughing about? It was none other than Gadotsi laughing at the two large manekiniko in front of the entrance of Ishtar's palace. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.